Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. What if the horrific murder of your loved one went unsolved for decades, leaving only questions and silence? Imagine the suffering, the annoyance, and the never-ending question: who killed them? What made them deserving of death? Will there ever be justice? A young life full of beauty and promise was tragically cut short 41 years ago, making this nightmare a reality for one family. The memories, the sorrow, and the desire for answers persisted even after the investigation was unsuccessful. A vibrant, aspirational, and hospitable beauty school student, Laura Kempton had her entire life ahead of her. However, her future was brutally stolen on that fateful day in 1981. Her family was left in ruins, looking for hints that seemed to disappear. Are you prepared to learn more about Laura's tragic tale? A family left with unresolved questions, a life cut short, and a decades-long quest for justice. Will she at last receive the justice she is due? Together, let's discover Laura's true fate. Imagine a young lady who is eager to face the world and has a sparkle in her eyes. That was Laura, a 23-year-old with a dreamy heart and a passion for life. Her contagious laugh and radiant smile had a way of illuminating the space. Laura moved to Portsmouth, New Hampshire in 1980 from her small town. She needed a change because she was sick of the same old routine. The electric energy of the city offered her a new beginning and limitless opportunities. Laura experienced a wave of liberation, as though she could now be who she truly was. She was drawn to the energy and atmosphere of the city's clubs and music scene. Laura was a beauty school student by day and a social butterfly at night. She scooped sundaes for summer tourists at Karen's Ice Cream and worked at the quirky Market Street gift shop Macro Polo. She was only months away from realizing her dream of becoming a hairdresser. She was adamant about establishing herself in the city, and she succeeded in doing so. She developed her hairdressing skills during the day and used her passion for dancing to engage with the community at night. Despite the negative aspects of the city, Laura remained resilient. She had a purpose and a dream. Her passions and her work provided her with solace. Laura believed she was changing the world, fostering relationships, and improving the city with each Sunday she scooped and haircut she styled. Laura was confident that she would overcome any obstacles and become even more radiant. She enjoyed dancing, laughing, and being present. She was constantly surrounded by friends and admirers as she visited well-known locations like Riverside and the Ranger Club. She wouldn't have it any other way, and her social calendar was constantly full. Although Laura wasn't committed to a single partner, she was seeing a man named Charlie, who was a gifted saxophonist for a band that frequently played at Lucas, a well-liked restaurant in the neighborhood. As their relationship grew, Laura was eager to see where it would take them. Laura had a promising future with seemingly limitless opportunities. She was a young lady with an uncontrollable spirit and a hopeful heart. She had no idea, however, that her life was about to take a terrible turn that would destroy her community, friends, and family. It would turn out to be one of Portsmouth's most notorious crimes. It was a night Laura's friends would never forget. On September 28, 1981. Laura and her friends were dancing at the Riverside Club on a typical Saturday night. All around them, lights were flashing and music was pounding. Laura first saw JR there, a man whose smile could light up any space. Laura and JR were dancing together, grew closer to one another as each song was played. They returned to Laura's house at the end of the evening and continued to chat and laugh until the wee hours of the morning. JR gladly accepted Laura's invitation to stay over since she truly liked him. They stayed up late, telling each other stories and making each other laugh until they were unable to stay awake. Still grinning and making jokes, they stopped by Goldie's Deli for a quick breakfast the next day. However, Laura had to leave quickly for her job at Macro Polo, which she genuinely loved. She was buzzing with energy as she left the house that morning, and her friends noticed how excited she appeared. Laura was thinking about JR during her lunch break at Cafe Petronella. After work, she was eager to see him again. She couldn't help but smile when she thought about what they had. Laura and her friend Karen got together later that night and made the decision to visit Lucas, a bustling place on Hanover Street that is well known for its fantastic dancing and music. Together, they had a great time laughing until their sides ached and dancing as if no one else was around. Laura was only interested in having fun with Karen and enjoying the music, despite several guys trying to get her attention. At 1 a.m., Karen bid Laura farewell as the evening came to an end. On 20 Chapel Street steps, they had no idea that danger was close by. A curious 13-year-old boy named R.R.C. lives across Sheath Street, left his bedroom to go to the restroom. As he walked through the living room, he noticed his mother sitting in the dark room, still awake. However, the living room window, which provided an excellent view of the first-floor apartment across the street, caught R.S.'s attention instead. The lovely young woman who had moved in that summer was someone he had become used to seeing. She was sitting with her back to the window on her couch. R.S. could make out the outline of something in her hand, possibly a cookie or cracker, and the soft curve of her shoulder blades. Not even R.S. one of the last times anyone would see Laura Kempton alive would be during this brief moment. It was an accidental glimpse, a brief moment in time of a life on the verge of tragedy. Everyone who knew Laura would be haunted by the tragedy that was about to unfold on the night that had started out so happily and with so much laughter. Hours later, on a clear Monday mid-morning, September 28, 1981, Officer Ron Grivois strolled through downtown Portsmouth. He was intimately familiar with these brick sidewalks. A young woman had failed to pay for her parking tickets at 20 Chapel Street, where he was headed. He saw that the front door was unlocked as he got closer to the structure. When he got to unit number 2, he discovered a door that was broken and had a missing panel. He peered in and saw a pair of legs bound at the ankles with a white cord and a jumbled heap of bedding. There was a terrible problem. With his thoughts racing, Grivois retreated. He looked around the stairwell and hallway, but he didn't see anything unusual. He radioed for backup after confirming that the scene was secure. Now, his ordinary call had become a sinister revelation. Despite being blocked by crime scene tape, a crowd had gathered outside 20 Chapel Street by 9:25 a.m. on the 29th. Officer Grivois' startling discovery was widely publicized. William Mortimer, the lead investigator and a seasoned detective with years of Portsmouth Police Department experience, was already on the scene. He absorbed the unsettling scene in front of him. Nearly all of Laura's body was concealed by a mattress, box springs, and a heap of bedding. From the knees down, only her legs were visible, restrained by a white cord from an electric blanket. Beneath her, a big blood stain had seeped into the rug. Mortimer saw evidence of a bloody struggle as he scanned the room. The walls were splattered with blood, Laura's possessions were all over the place, and drawers and closets were looted. Mortimer realized he had a difficult case ahead of him. After witnessing the chaotic and gory scene, Mortimer's team cautiously raised the mattress and blankets as he continued to look around, revealing a scene that chilled his blood. With a green pillowcase covering her face and a gray telephone cord suffocating her neck, Laura lay bare, her body bruised and battered. Mortimer gently took off the pillowcase and his heart fell. Laura's features were hardly distinguishable due to the tangle of purple bruises and swelling on her face. She had been brutally beaten, with blows so severe they almost crushed her skull, as the medical examiner would later confirm. However, that wasn't all. A bottle of wine was lying next to her dead body, its innocence seeming to mock Mortimer. Then, in sharp contrast to Laura's non-smoking habits, there was the cigarette butt haphazardly left on the floor. Mortimer appeared to be taunted with questions and clues by the killer's presence. Who was this individual? Why had they acted with such unimaginable violence? This was not the end of it. Many questions were hanging around the window. By whom was Laura killed? Who was present when she passed away? What afflicted her prior to her demise? Who was going to give Laura justice? Mortimer and his team found a vital piece of evidence in the hallway after Laura's body was moved to a gurney. A tiny black metal hook that had been ripped from the mailbox. The murderer had repurposed this commonplace item, which was used to hang keys, to obtain entry. Mortimer saw that the criminal had pried out the molding with the hook, which made it possible for them to reach inside and open the door. Investigators conducted a comprehensive search and gathered hundreds of possible pieces of evidence, such as 2 cords, a cigarette butt, a pillowcase that covered Laura's head and neck, and a glass wine bottle that was discovered on the floor next to her body. They painstakingly scanned the exterior and interior of the apartment for palm prints and fingerprints, and found multiple matches, particularly on the door and a phone within the apartment. These discoveries might contain important hints that help solve the mystery of Laura's untimely death. Laura's autopsy was performed later that afternoon by medical examiner Dr. Dennis Carlson. His findings, severe head trauma and evidence of sexual assault, confirmed the terrible severity of her injuries. Skin scrapings from Laura's upper left thigh, vaginal swabs, and swabs from the telephone cord around her neck were among the crucial pieces of evidence that Dr. Carlson gathered. Mortimer was determined to put the pieces together and determine who was responsible for her death, even though the investigation had only just begun. In order to question Laura's friends, family, co-workers, and classmates, basically anybody who might have had contact with her in the days leading up to her death, he assembled a team of detectives and police officers. These interviews painted a picture of Laura as a happy, gregarious young lady with a vibrant social life. It was hard to think anyone would want to hurt her. Speaking with JR was of special interest to the police because of his recent relationship with Laura. Before leaving for breakfast on Sunday, September 27, he affirmed that they had sex early in the morning and again later that day. Even though he took a shower afterwards, JR admitted that samples taken from Laura's body may include his semen. He gave some interesting information about Laura's habits and mentioned that she had no visible cuts or bruises from their time together. First of all, Laura always made sure to lock the door of her apartment, even when they left for a quick snack at around 3 in the morning. The Sunday, she questioned JR to make sure the front door was locked. Secondly, JR noticed that as they got ready to leave in the morning, Laura put a wad of cash into a plain envelope on her kitchen table. Although she didn't say so, the money might have been for rent or a utility bill. Later, it was found that the envelope and its contents were missing, most likely taken by the criminal. Additional information about what happened after Karen left Laura early on Monday morning was given by her neighbors. RS, and at around 1:30 a.m., his mother, who lived across the street, noticed Laura in her living room. When Daniel, a 40-year-old resident of Laura's building, got home about 30 minutes later, he saw that the ground floor hallway light was out. He suspected someone was fixing Laura's door, possibly following a break-in, after noticing a missing wooden panel and hearing sounds coming from inside her apartment. Later, it was discovered that the light bulb in the hallway had most likely been purposefully loosened. If Daniel's timing was correct, Laura's killer was most likely the source of the sounds he heard. Vital samples were taken from Laura's body by Dr. Carlson, including skin scrapings from her upper thigh and vaginal swabs and smears. The New Hampshire State Forensic Lab received these for examination. The lab was able to identify blood types from the samples even though DNA testing was not yet available 4 years before its potential in criminal investigations was realized. According to the results, Laura's blood type A was found on the wine bottle, suggesting that it was probably used in the crime. Additionally, type A blood was discovered on the pillowcase and door molding. Sperm were found in the skin scrapings and vaginal smears, and there were traces of seminal fluid in the telephone cord. 42 years later, these discoveries would be essential to the case's resolution. In a terrifying coincidence, Tammy Little, a fellow Portsmouth Beauty School student, was discovered murdered in her apartment a few months later on October 19, 1982, with comparable injuries. Fears of a serial killer were sparked by the widespread suspicion that the two crimes were connected. Some similarities existed between the two cases. Both victims lived alone in ground-floor apartments, were in their early 20s, and were unmarried. About a mile separated the two addresses. A few months prior to their deaths, both women had just moved in. Both frequented the same local bars and belonged to the same social circles. Both were killed early in the morning following a night out with friends in the fall. They had both sustained severe head injuries. Both suffered deformities to their faces. They both went to Portsmouth Beauty School. Both had modeled for photographers in the area. Detective Mortimer was careful to avoid making hasty connections between the cases in the absence of strong evidence. Despite these connections, the murders of Tammy Little and Laura Kempton were still unsolved. As of September 25, 1985, investigators were unable to obtain sufficient evidence to make an arrest, despite suspicions about men who were acquaintances or had been spotted with the victims. Both cases are still being investigated, Portsmouth Police Captain George Crook assured the public. The frustration of having a top suspect, but not enough proof to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, was acknowledged by Assistant Attorney General Brian Tucker. Tucker stressed that before moving forward, investigators need to have faith in their case. It's ironic that in 1985, Alec Jeffreys, a trailblazing scientist, solved a double murder in England using genetic fingerprinting, but it would be more than 10 years before this technology was taken into account in U.S. investigations. The development of cases like Kempton's and Little's was hampered by the fact that New Hampshire wouldn't set up its own DNA testing facility until 2002. Detectives sent 2 DNA samples from Laura's case to Cellmark Diagnostics in Maryland in 2000 for analysis. The telephone wire on her neck and the area of her thighs were the sites of the samples. They obtained a partial male DNA profile from the thigh sample, despite their inability to create a DNA profile from the wire. The Portsmouth police submitted more evidence to the Maine State Crime Lab for analysis in 2002, 2 years later. From the vaginal swab, forensic analyst Kathy McMillan created 2 DNA profiles, one for Laura and another for an unidentified man. A partial male profile that matched the vaginal swab was discovered on the cigarette butt that was discovered close to Laura's body. Interestingly, this profile also matched the partial profile from the previously acquired thigh scrapings. When J.R. Laura's last known sexual partner was tested and turned out to not match the DNA evidence, the investigation took an unexpected turn. In actuality, even though they had previously had sex, his DNA was completely absent from her body. As a result, over the course of the following 10 years, investigators eliminated hundreds of people of interest and continued to gather comparison DNA samples. An investigation into the use of genetic genealogy to solve cold cases, such as Laura Kempton's, was initiated in September 2021 by the Attorney General's Office, New Hampshire State Crime Lab, and Portsmouth Police. To reanalyze the vaginal swab samples, they contacted Identifinders International. The lead investigator learned that the DNA profile of the unidentified male had been successfully acquired and matched to a close relative in the GED match database in May 2022, 8 months later. The unidentified male was soon recognized by genetic genealogist Linda Doyle as the child of 2 particular people who had only one biological child. The lead detective took a blood card from the autopsy, but the child had died almost 20 years earlier, and sent it to the Maine State Crime Lab for comparison. Laura's vaginal swab and the DNA on the blood card matched exactly, proving that Ronnie James Lee was the murderer. Authorities finally had a name to link to the anonymous suspect after more than 42 years. On January 16, 1960, Ronnie James Lee was born in Fort Myers. Charlie James Lee and Janie Mae are listed as his parents in his obituary, but it's unclear if they were both his biological parents. Of Charlie and Janie Mae's 6 children, Ronnie was the third. When he was growing up, his parents got divorced. Although not much is known about Ronnie's early years, he joined the Army as a teenager in the late 1970s and remained there until May 15, 1981. At that time, he and his mother resided on Rock Hill Avenue in Portsmouth's North End, only a short 8-minute drive or 40-minute walk from Laura Kempton's residence in Old Harbor. Although Ronnie was employed by MBI Security, he began working as a security guard for the Liberty Mutual building in Portsmouth in June 2001. Laura moved into her Chapel Street apartment at the same time. Ronnie killed Laura when he broke into her apartment in September 2001, but he escaped being apprehended by police. When Ronnie was arrested for attempted burglary in November 1982, his interactions with the Portsmouth Police Department took on a significant role. He went on a burglary rampage the next summer, breaking into 4 residences and 1 city business. Similar to his break-in at Laura's apartment, one of these burglaries involved smashing a window pane and opening it from the inside. Ronnie was found guilty of sexual assault and burglary in Keene, New Hampshire, in 1987-3. Around 30:30 a.m., a young woman who was at home during the robbery woke up to discover someone caressing her. Ronnie was standing over her when she opened her eyes. Her roommate was awakened by her scream, and Ronnie ran away with jewelry and cash that had been stolen. After his arrest, he received a 3-year prison sentence that ran from 1987 to 1990. In 2005, Ronnie passed away at the age of 45 from a cocaine overdose. He left behind a son, multiple step-siblings, and a criminal legacy that was kept under wraps for almost 20 years after his passing. The murder of Laura Kempton in 1981 has finally been solved after decades of investigation. To make the announcement, law enforcement officials convened at the State Police Communications Center in Concord on a bright afternoon in late July. Ronnie James Lee was identified as Laura's murderer by New Hampshire Attorney General John Formella. Lee, who would have been 63 today, would have been charged with robbery, battery, aggravated sexual assault, and first-degree murder. Unfortunately, Lee had already died, so justice was served too late. The investigation continued despite the case going cold thanks to detectives' hard work and advances in forensic science. Before his death in 2019, Police Commissioner William Mortimer, the case's first lead detective, had stated that he was confident the case could be solved. At last, his trust in forensic science and his team has been validated. The family of Laura Kempton expressed gratitude to the police for their diligent efforts in resolving the case. They valued the investigators' commitment and perseverance in ensuring Laura and her family members received justice. Laura's family and loved ones could now finally rest easy, knowing that Ronnie James Lee was found guilty of her murder. Justice was served, but it took a while. This case demonstrated the importance of perseverance in pursuing justice and the truth, no matter how long it takes. In the meantime, the evidence from Tammy Little's 1982 murder is still intact and is awaiting the identification of a suspect through scientific and genealogical advancements. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. It was a quiet evening in Dallas when Amber Guyger, a seasoned police officer, entered the wrong apartment. What happened next would send shockwaves through the community, the nation, and change the course of two families' lives forever. But was it truly a tragic mistake, or was something darker at play? As the courtroom drama unfolded, questions about race, power, and accountability took center stage. What happened that night, and who was really to blame? Botham Jean was born on September 29, 1991, in Castries, the capital of the island nation of St. Lucia. His parents, Alison and Bertram Jean, were deeply religious and members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Raised in such a faith-driven environment, Botham's upbringing instilled in him strong moral values, including honesty, tolerance, and a desire to help others. These qualities were noted by many who knew him in his lifetime. From a young age, Botham stood out among his peers. His parents raised him with a strong sense of responsibility and a focus on education. In school, he demonstrated exceptional abilities in mathematics and music. At a young age, Botham began singing in the church choir, where his deep and moving voice immediately caught attention. Music became an important part of his life, and the church was a place where he felt supported and confident. After finishing school, Botham decided to continue his education in the United States. He chose to attend Hardin-Simmons University in Texas, where he pursued a degree in accounting. This decision marked an important milestone in his life, as moving to the U.S. opened up new opportunities for professional growth and personal connections. After graduation, Botham secured a job as an accountant in Dallas. His career quickly flourished, and his colleagues highly valued his professionalism and approach to work. For Botham, working at PwC wasn't just a career step, it was an opportunity to contribute to society and provide for his family. He supported his parents, helped the youth in his community in St. Lucia, and dreamed of advancing further in his career. His co-workers remembered him as someone who always brought positivity and inspiration to the team, fostering a strong sense of camaraderie and striving for the best results. But it wasn't just his professional life that mattered to Botham. He was actively involved in the life of his church in Dallas, where he was part of the music group and often spent time with friends from the community. He found joy in simple things, cooking dinners for his friends, organizing parties to maintain friendships, and always sharing his sincere smile and support with others. His life was filled with plans for the future, full of optimism and a drive to achieve even greater things. Amber Guyger, on the other hand, came from a small town near Dallas. She was born on August 9, 1988, and grew up in a family where discipline and hard work were strongly emphasized. From an early age, Amber dreamed of becoming a police officer. Her father worked in local law enforcement, and she knew she wanted to follow in his footsteps to help people and bring order to society. Amber pursued this dream after high school by enrolling in the police academy. She worked hard and demonstrated the discipline and focus needed for a career in law enforcement. After graduating from the academy, Amber began her career with the Dallas Police Department, where she eventually became an officer. Her colleagues described her as determined and hardworking, though she often expressed frustration with the emotional strain and high stress of her job. The life of a police officer is always filled with risk and stress, and Amber was no exception. She often found herself in situations that required quick decisions, where her reaction had to be immediate. These working conditions took a toll on her emotional state. Over time, she became more withdrawn and cautious in her relationships with others, preferring to spend her free time alone to recharge. Amber Guyger was dedicated to her profession, but her life was full of contradictions. She tried to hide her vulnerabilities, but those who knew her well could see that she often felt lonely and sometimes even lost in the world. Despite her strong and determined character, her internal struggles and fatigue from the constant pressure made her life less stable. She would often return home late, exhausted and emotionally drained, which perhaps played a critical role in the tragic events that unfolded later. After moving to Dallas, Amber bought an apartment in a high-rise building not far from her workplace. She hoped that living close to her job would help her rest more and not waste too much time on commuting. Life in Dallas was supposed to be a fresh start for her, but this new beginning didn't bring the peace she had hoped for. Work stress and emotional strain became part of her daily routine. She often found it hard to manage the growing exhaustion, which led to tension and personal issues in her life. September 6, 2018, started for Botham Jean just like any other day. He woke up early in the morning as usual and headed to his office in downtown Dallas. It was another busy day, filled with meetings, discussions, and preparing reports for clients. Botham was someone who always strived to do his best at work, and this day was no different. His colleagues noticed his upbeat mood and the smile he shared with those around him. No one could have predicted that this would be the last day of his life. After work, Botham returned to his apartment in the Southside Flats complex, located in the heart of Dallas. His apartment was his sanctuary, a place where he could unwind after a long day. That evening, Botham decided to keep things simple. He planned to cook dinner, play his favorite music, and relax. He loved cooking, and it was one of his ways to relieve the stress of his workday. Meanwhile, Amber Guyger was finishing a 13-hour shift at the police station. That day had been especially grueling for her. Numerous calls, patrolling, and paperwork had completely worn her out. She felt a fatigue that seemed to weigh down her entire body, and all she wanted was to get home as quickly as possible. When her shift finally ended, Amber headed home, eager to collapse into bed and rest. However, her exhaustion and emotional depletion would play a pivotal role in the tragic events that were about to unfold. Amber arrived at her apartment complex, where she lived on the 3rd floor. On her way to her apartment, her attention was distracted as she was scrolling through messages on her phone, reflecting on the day she had just experienced. At some point, she accidentally rode the elevator to the 4th floor instead of her own. The doors to the apartments in this building were similar, and in her tired state, she didn't notice that she had approached the wrong unit. The door to Botham Jean's apartment was slightly ajar, which immediately made her suspicious. In her exhaustion and confusion, she thought someone might have broken into her apartment. Amber drew her service weapon without considering the potential consequences. The only thought in her mind was that she needed to protect herself. She pushed the door open and entered inside. Botham, who was preparing dinner in his apartment, heard the noise. He turned toward the door, unsure of what was happening. Amber, seeing a figure inside, mistook him for an intruder and without hesitation fired twice. The shots echoed through the quiet apartment, and within moments, Botham fell to the floor. Amber turned on the lights, and only then realized her mistake. She saw an unfamiliar man lying in a pool of blood, and it hit her that she had entered the wrong apartment. Panic and horror overwhelmed her. She rushed to Botham, trying to administer first aid, She called 911, explaining the situation to the operator, desperately trying to explain that she had entered the wrong unit and had shot someone. Her voice trembled with fear and regret as she pleaded with Botham to hold on, repeatedly saying she hadn't meant for this to happen. While waiting for emergency services to arrive, Amber attempted to stop the bleeding, but her efforts were in vain. Neighbors who had heard the gunshots and cries began to step into the hallway. Some of them also called the police, reporting the gunfire in the apartment complex. Paramedics arrived at the scene and tried to save Botham, but his injuries were fatal. That evening, the life of a young man with so many hopes and dreams was tragically cut short. Amber Guyger was detained at the scene. She appeared to be in a state of shock, completely disoriented, repeating that she hadn't meant for this to happen and that it was a mistake. She was taken to the police station for questioning. The police launched an investigation to understand how this tragedy unfolded. There were many questions. Why hadn't Amber realized she was not in her own apartment? Why had she resorted to using her weapon without confirming that there was an actual threat? These questions became central to the investigation and sparked intense public debate. As investigators gathered evidence, the public began to actively discuss the incident. The case sparked a massive outcry, especially in the context of racial issues and concerns about police abuse of power. Botham Jean was black, and many saw his death as yet another example of unjust treatment and bias by law enforcement. People began to ask, did Botham's race play a role in Amber mistaking him for an intruder and shooting him without attempting to assess the situation? Meanwhile, Botham's family was devastated by the events. His mother, Allison Jean, was in St. Lucia when she learned of the tragedy. It was a crushing blow for her. Her son, who had moved to the U.S. to build a better life, was killed in his own apartment. Allison began to demand justice for her son, calling on the public and authorities for a thorough and impartial investigation. She knew Botham as a kind, responsible, and hardworking person who posed no threat to anyone. In the days following the incident, there was a flood of contradictory reports and rumors. The media extensively covered the case, and public opinion was deeply divided. Some believed Amber had made a tragic mistake, while others argued her actions were the result of bias and an inability to properly assess the situation. Protests and rallies began in Dallas and other cities, with people taking to the streets demanding justice for Botham Jean and his family. During the investigation, it was revealed that Amber Guyger had been exhausted after a long shift and may have been disoriented due to her fatigue. Her defense attorneys argued that she acted in a state of stress and fear for her life. However, the prosecution maintained that her actions were inexcusable for a police officer who should be able to control their emotions and make sound decisions, especially in situations involving the use of a weapon. Witnesses who lived in the apartment complex testified that they heard screams and gunshots. Some of them tried to figure out what was happening, but no one expected such a tragic outcome. Investigators collected evidence, reviewed surveillance footage, and analyzed testimonies to reconstruct the full picture of the events that day. They were trying to determine whether this was truly a tragic mistake or if other factors contributed to such a devastating outcome. After Amber Guyger's arrest, the case entered a new phase, a lengthy and complex process of investigation and trial preparation. Amber was charged with manslaughter. During the investigation, her attorneys argued that her actions were a tragic but unintentional mistake caused by extreme exhaustion following a long shift. However, the prosecution maintained that Amber's actions were unacceptable for a trained police officer who was expected to assess situations carefully and avoid unnecessary use of force. One of the key pieces of evidence was footage from the surveillance cameras at the apartment complex where both Botham Jean and Amber Guyger lived. These recordings helped reconstruct the events of that night. The cameras captured Amber arriving at the building and entering. The footage showed her going to the wrong floor and approaching an apartment that belonged to Botham. Investigators pointed out that she failed to exercise due diligence and did not notice she was on the wrong floor. In addition to the video evidence, phone records played a significant role in the case. Shortly before the incident, Amber had been texting with a colleague with whom she had a personal relationship. Prosecutors argued that these messages might have distracted her and contributed to her failing to realize she was entering the wrong apartment. The defense, however, downplayed the importance of the texts, claiming they were unrelated to the incident and could not have influenced her actions. Over the course of several months, investigators continued gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. Neighbors in the apartment complex provided statements about hearing shouts and gunshots. Some claimed they heard voices before the shots were fired, suggesting there may have been an exchange between Amber and Botham prior to the tragic event. However, witness testimonies varied, making it difficult to piece together a definitive account of what happened. At the same time, forensic examinations were conducted. Experts meticulously analyzed the firearm used in the shooting, as well as the bullet trajectory and other physical evidence, to determine the positions of Amber and Botham at the time of the shooting. One contentious point was the positioning of Botham's body and the angle of the bullet. The prosecution argued that the evidence showed Botham did not pose a threat to Amber, while the defense claimed she acted out of self-defense. In August 2019, a highly publicized trial began, attracting widespread attention from both the public and the media. The courtroom was packed with journalists, family members, and friends of Botham Jean, as well as supporters of both the prosecution and the defense. The case promised to be a difficult one, touching on issues of police competence, personal responsibility, and racial justice. The trial opened with statements from both the prosecution and the defense. Prosecutors argued that Amber Guyger's actions were not just a mistake, but the result of her negligence as a police officer. They emphasized that any officer should exercise heightened caution, especially when it comes to using a firearm. Furthermore, they pointed out that Botham Jean was in his own home and posed no threat to Amber. The defense, on the other hand, built its case around the idea that Amber was acting out of extreme exhaustion and confusion, driven by fear for her own safety. Her attorney sought to portray her as someone who made a tragic mistake without any malicious intent. They also highlighted her previously unblemished record in law enforcement, hoping to elicit sympathy from the jury. Over the course of several weeks, witnesses, experts, and family members of both the defendant and the deceased testified. One of the most emotional moments of the trial came when Botham's mother, Labinjo Jean, took the stand. She spoke about her son's dreams and plans for the future, describing him as a kind and compassionate person. Her words deeply moved everyone in the courtroom, emphasizing the tremendous loss her family had endured. Also testifying was Botham's brother, Jean, whose statement became one of the most talked about moments of the trial. In his address to the court, he publicly forgave Amber Guyger and even asked for permission to hug her. This gesture sparked a range of reactions. Some saw it as an incredible act of kindness and Christian forgiveness, while others felt that such an action should not overshadow the need for fair justice. Among the evidence presented in court were surveillance footage and an audio recording of Amber's 911 call after the shooting. In the recording, she can be heard in a panic, repeatedly stating that she had entered the wrong apartment and never intended to kill anyone. This call sparked further discussion as it captured her desperation, but also highlighted the lack of any attempt to determine who was in front of her before resorting to using her weapon. The expert testimony focused on analyzing the trajectory of the bullet, the position of Botham Jean's body, and the circumstances surrounding the shooting. Experts for the prosecution argued that the bullet's path suggested Botham was in a relaxed position, likely sitting or standing up from his couch when he was shot. This contradicted the defense's claim that he had been moving toward Amber and posed a threat. However, the defense attempted to discredit these conclusions, stating that the trajectory could not be conclusively determined due to a lack of data. Throughout the trial, the public closely followed the developments of the case. Protests and rallies continued, with activists calling not only for a fair sentence for Amber Guyger, but also for police reform to prevent similar incidents in the future. There were widespread calls for changes to police training, especially regarding decision-making skills in high-stress situations, and for greater accountability for mistakes that lead to tragic outcomes. Amber Guyger also took the stand, describing the events of that night from her perspective. She explained how she had come home after a long shift, feeling tired and disoriented. She claimed that she genuinely believed she was in her own apartment and thought Botham was an intruder who had broken into her home. She cried as she spoke, stating that she never intended to harm anyone and that it was a terrible mistake, one that she would have to live with for the rest of her life. Her testimony was emotional and, in the opinion of some, sincere, though it sparked conflicting reactions among the audience. The question of what the appropriate sentence should be became central in the final stage of the trial. Prosecutors insisted that Amber Guyger should be convicted of manslaughter, arguing that her actions led to the death of an innocent person and that a police officer who cannot assess a situation properly should not remain on the force. The defense, on the other hand, requested a lighter sentence, citing the lack of intent and arguing that Amber already carried a heavy burden of guilt for her mistake. After several days of deliberation, the time finally came for the jury to render their verdict in the case of Amber Guyger. Tension filled the courtroom as all eyes were on the judge and jury, who would decide whether the former police officer was guilty of causing Botham Jean's death. For many, this trial had become a symbol not just of a personal tragedy but also of the deep-rooted issues within American society: racial bias, abuse of power, and a lack of accountability within law enforcement. On October 2, 2019, the jury announced their verdict. Amber Guyger was found guilty of the crime that resulted in Botham Jean's death. This decision came as a surprise to many, particularly since the prosecution had initially sought a conviction for manslaughter. The charge of murder carried more serious consequences and a longer prison sentence. In the courtroom, there were audible expressions of relief and quiet celebrations. This verdict was a significant step toward justice for Botham's family and those who had supported them throughout the long and painful trial. The following day, the judge delivered the sentence. Amber Guyger was sentenced to 10 years in prison. In her statement, the judge acknowledged the complexity and tragedy of the case, emphasizing that both sides had experienced significant loss. Guyger, the judge noted, had made a grave error that cost an innocent person his life. However, despite the weight of the sentence, many felt that 10 years was too lenient for a life lost as a result of such a severe mistake. While some were satisfied with the court's decision, others believed it fell short. Activists and supporters of the Jean family argued that the sentence did not reflect the gravity of the crime and was not enough punishment for the life that had been taken. Protests continued in Dallas and other cities, with many calling for further reforms in the criminal justice and law enforcement systems. This case became a symbol of the fight for justice and brought renewed attention to the challenges Black Americans face in interactions with law enforcement. Amber Guyger herself remained in shock following the verdict and sentencing. She repeatedly stated that she had no intention of harming anyone and that it was a terrible mistake. Her attorneys filed an appeal, hoping to reduce her sentence. They argued that 10 years was too harsh for someone who acted out of confusion, stress, and exhaustion. However, as the trial concluded, Guyger was taken into custody to begin serving her sentence. Botham Jean's family expressed their gratitude to everyone who supported them throughout the long months of the trial. Botham's mother, Jean, stated that while the verdict provided some sense of resolution, it could never bring back her son. She emphasized the need for systemic reforms in the justice system and law enforcement to prevent similar tragedies from happening again. Allison continued to advocate for change within police departments, hoping her son's case would serve as a catalyst for meaningful progress. The case of Botham Jean had a profound impact on public opinion and the national conversation around policing. This incident became yet another example highlighting systemic issues in law enforcement and the treatment of Black citizens. In response to public pressure, several states began considering legislative initiatives aimed at improving police training, particularly in situations involving the use of force and community interactions. Calls grew louder for increased accountability for officers' actions, and mandatory training programs focused on racial and cultural competency. Additionally, the Botham Jean case inspired the creation of organizations and funds dedicated to supporting families of victims of police misconduct and advocating for law enforcement reform. These groups provided legal and emotional support while spearheading campaigns to raise awareness about racial discrimination and abuse of power. Jean became an active participant in these initiatives, using her personal story to fight for justice and systemic change. As time passed, Amber Guyger continued to serve her sentence in prison while awaiting the outcome of her appeal. This case not only shattered the lives of two families, but also left a lasting mark on American society. The tragic mistake that led to Botham Jean's death served as a stark reminder of the need for reform and the importance of law enforcement officials making sound and responsible decisions, especially in life-and-death situations. The story of Botham Jean and Amber Guyger remains one of the most discussed and impactful cases in recent U.S. history. It underscores the profound consequences of poor judgment, particularly when exercised by those in positions of power. While justice, according to many, was only partially achieved, the case left unanswered questions and became a symbol of the ongoing fight for equality and accountability in America. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In this video, we examine what happened on December 26, 2011, in Kershaw, South Carolina. Hope Melton, 30, called her grandmother to report that she was being followed while driving down a country road. Hope was terrified and unsure of what to do. The call ended before she could provide her grandmother with any information. The police were able to identify the suspect by using CCTV footage to solve this case. The subpar performance of one of the authorities, which ultimately impacted the case's outcome, is another noteworthy feature of this case. William Roger and Elizabeth Ray Hodge Roscoe were the parents of Beverly Hope Roscoe Melton, who was born in Chehaw, South Carolina, on December 4, 1981. She was a member of the Beta Club, Vocational Honor Society, Health Occupational Class, and Chorus at Chesterfield High School, where she graduated with honors in the year 2000. Hope worked as the manager of McBee, South Carolina's T&N Country Store. She was a children's church teacher at Lancaster Church of God. Hope had been happily married to Gary Lee Melton for a little more than a year. Although they wanted children, their final Christmas together was in 2011. Hope was going to see her grandmother, who lived about 30 miles away from her home, on December 26, 2011. Rather than showing up for lunch, she got a call on her grandmother's cell phone. Hope called out in a distressed tone. She asked for assistance after telling her grandmother that she was being followed. After the call ended, Hope's mother and grandmother got into their car and headed out to find her. They saw Hope's vehicle parked on the side of the road 5 miles away on a lengthy country road, but Hope was not there. Her grandmother dialed 911 right away, and the county sheriff's office received the call. The call was forwarded to police officers as a missing person report when it reached the sheriff's office. When a missing person report is received, it is imperative that prompt action be taken. At once, one of the sheriff's deputies arrived on the scene. After examining Hope's vehicle, he ruled out the possibility of a traffic accident because it was undamaged and in good operating order. Hope's wallet was gone, but her purse was in the car. Despite searching the vehicle, a forensic team was unable to uncover any information about Hope's whereabouts. Police and volunteers started searching the area for leads. Gary, Hope's shocked and upset husband, showed up on the scene. He told the police that Hope was going to visit her grandmother and had planned to stop at a gas station. At the time, that was the detective's only lead. Hope's grandmother lived about 30 miles away from her home, and there were 4 gas stations along the way. The detectives made the decision to examine each one sequentially. Security cameras were present at the first gas station the detective looking into Hope Melton's disappearance visited. The detective started watching the video in the hopes of spotting Hope. Her husband claims that she left the house at approximately 11:45 a.m. The manager was asked to show the detective the video from an hour prior to Hope calling her family in a panic. When a male customer entered the store at 12:19 p.m., everything appeared to be as usual. The investigator kept watching the footage. A woman entered the picture 3 minutes later. Hope weighed around 140 pounds, stood 5 feet 5 inches tall, and was blonde. She had on blue jeans and a pink shirt. The detective knew right away that it wasn't Hope because the woman in the video was taller than her. At 12:45 p.m., they continued to scroll through the tape, but Hope never appeared. This implied that she had most likely refilled her vehicle at a different gas station. The members of Hope's family were in shock. They looked for logical reasons why she might have vanished. There was a slim chance that she had just become stuck in the mud and gotten out of the car. Maybe someone had come to get her and taken her to a rescue location. They wished Hope well and a speedy return home. A second gas station, just 10 miles from the location where Hope's abandoned car had been discovered, was visited by the detective looking into her disappearance. Additionally, there were security cameras that might aid in the investigation. The detective informed the manager that they were searching for a missing woman when they first arrived at the gas station. The manager recalled possibly seeing Hope around 12 p.m. when the detective described her appearance and the vehicle she was driving. There was no question that Hope Melton had visited this gas station prior to her disappearance. Thanks to a security camera placed outside, she had filled up her car and nothing seemed to be bothering her at the time. Another camera captured a man holding the door open for Hope as she entered. Hope left the store after paying for her gas. She appeared content and in a positive frame of mind. She appeared to be eager to spend the remainder of the day with her grandmother. The man who held the door open for Hope was the one who caught the detective's attention when he re-watched the video. She was followed into the store by a man wearing a white cap, according to surveillance footage. He glanced over at Hope. The detective watched the man in the cap while Hope paid for her gas and walked away. The man left the store after making his payment at the counter. Regretfully, nothing in the video could be used to identify the man. In an attempt to identify this man's vehicle, the detective once more looked at the surveillance footage. Hope was seen walking toward the store to pay for gas on one of the tapes. Just then, a dark minivan arrived and a man in a white cap climbed out. Regretfully, his car's license plate was hidden. Hope was seen driving away from the gas station when the detective flipped to another outdoor camera. She made her way back to her car, and just as she was ready to leave, a gray car arrived. Hope was not followed out of the gas station by the man in the white cap, or the man who got out of it and turned to watch Hope's car drive away. The detective repeatedly viewed the segment in an attempt to capture every detail. He had to locate the other hints he was certain were concealed in the gas station video. He was right. When Hope was making her way back to her car, he flipped to the first camera. An orange Chevy appeared in the frame. The Chevy turned back toward the exit after crossing the parking lot. The detective saw something significant as Hope pulled away. The orange car was following her. Prior to Hope's disappearance, the detective believed he had seen the car following her. The police had to determine what happened after obtaining evidence that Hope had been followed from the gas station. The search team discovered alarming evidence in the meantime. They discovered a blanket covered in blood and a pink bracelet 6 miles from Hope's abandoned car. Hope's husband was able to identify the bracelet. The bracelet was a Christmas gift from him. Hope's well-being was seriously threatened by all of this. The detective had to confirm that it wasn't a coincidence after watching the gas station surveillance footage that showed the orange Chevy pursuing Hope's vehicle. Hope had to pass an office building with multiple security cameras on her way to her grandmother's house. The building was still closed for Christmas when the detective arrived by car. Finding an office manager with keys and knowledge of the CCTV system took some time. The parking lot and the road Hope could take to get to her grandmother's house were both covered by numerous security cameras on the building. The detective's primary objective was to determine whether Hope was being followed by the orange Chevy, or if it had veered off course. The cameras were programmed to record only when they detected movement because the offices were closed for Christmas. The detective started watching the video, which had been taken shortly after 12 p.m. At 12:06 p.m., the detective noticed Hope's car enter the frame. An orange car that had been spotted at the gas station earlier entered the frame 2 seconds later. The orange Chevy can be seen in the video trailing Hope's vehicle by only a few yards. Hope's car was discovered in the woods, and both cars were traveling north toward the road. Although the license plate numbers could not be seen due to the poor quality of the video, the car was identifiable, and police issued an APB. The orange car was stopped by police on a Jefferson, South Carolina street. After an hour or two, Nicholas Miller, a 23-year-old local, was the driver. He was the only person in the vehicle. Perhaps because he had something to conceal, he was extremely apprehensive when the police stopped him. After being taken to the police station, he was questioned by a detective. Miller gave evasive answers to every question. Miller was asked by the detective to describe his day, including his activities and whereabouts. Miller retorted that he had gone shopping at a Walmart 30 miles away in the morning. After that, he returned to Jefferson by car. The detective looking into Hope Melton's disappearance went to Walmart, where Miller claimed to have shopped after police requested a search warrant for Miller's vehicle. His story had to be confirmed by the police. Every action on the sales floor is captured by the store's many cameras. Walmart's video surveillance footage was a relief to law enforcement since it supported Nicholas Miller's account. At around 10 in the morning, his orange Chevy pulled into the parking lot. The detective recognized Miller when the driver got out. His story had been verified thus far. Like hundreds of other customers, he entered Walmart like any other, and nothing unusual appeared to be going on. He seemed to be going about his everyday business. He didn't bring a basket or shopping cart. The detective discovered, however, that Miller was no typical shopper. As the tape continued to play, he didn't appear to be interested in the goods being sold there. He was just loitering around the store. Maybe he had a completely different reason for being in the store. At one point, the detective saw that Miller was not wandering around the store but was actually following a blonde woman who was ignoring him and going about her own business. After watching the video again, the detective was certain that his suspicion was right. Miller followed the woman everywhere. She did, however, reappear in the video a short while later, this time with a man. It would be reasonable to assume that Miller now understood that this was an impossible goal for him. The couple left the store a few minutes later. According to investigators, the woman might have been fortunate to get away. Cameras caught Miller leaving the store a few minutes later. It looked like he was upset that a possible target had escaped his grasp as he left Walmart. At this point, we can only presume that he was returning to Jefferson, probably to meet Hope at a gas station. Although Hope's family had hoped she would return home safely, it became evident that something horrible had happened to her when police were able to obtain a search warrant for Miller's vehicle. Forensic investigators discovered blood spatter on the driver's side bumper and the passenger side fender while inspecting the vehicle. Hope's wallet was also discovered in Miller's vehicle. The decision was made to question Miller once more in light of the new evidence. It's crucial to remember that Chesterfield County Sheriff Sam Parker conducted the interrogation. Keep that name in mind, it matters. Miller initially denied any involvement in Hope Melton's disappearance during the interrogation, but after learning of the evidence, he eventually acknowledged his guilt and consented to accompany the police to Hope's body. 14 miles from the location where Hope's car was discovered, Miller guided investigators to a secluded turkey farm. She had no clothes on and was face up on her back on the ground. The scene was absolutely horrifying. There was nothing Miller could explain with regard to his actions. The discovery of Hope's body was communicated to her family. Those who knew and loved Hope Melton were forever altered by what had happened to her. Police were now able to piece together what had happened before Hope died. Miller recently broke up with his girlfriend, investigators found out. We'll never know for sure, but they think this might have contributed to his nervous breakdown. Miller noticed Hope filling up her car at the gas station. He made the decision to go after her at that crucial juncture. She was looking forward to a great day with her grandmother, after having a great Christmas with her family. She was unaware that she was being followed. Hope called her grandmother as soon as they arrived at a backwoods road because she knew she was in danger. Miller acknowledged that he had pulled Hope out of her car, pushed her off the road, and pushed her into his vehicle. After he drove her into the woods and tore off her clothes, you can probably guess what he did next. Miller made an effort to hide. After bringing Hope to a turkey farm, he killed her with a baseball bat and disposed of her body. Hope's chance encounter with the monster ended tragically after she stopped for gas. It is incomprehensible to humans. Prior to the trial, Nicholas Miller was charged with several counts. Police received horrifying evidence from his ex-girlfriend's photos. Only a few hours prior to his abduction of Hope Melton, Miller had pursued her in his orange Chevy. We must now learn more about Chesterfield County Sheriff Sam Parker. He plays a crucial role in this case, as I indicated before. I'll tell you why Parker was let go from the police department. According to officials, Parker provided uniforms, badges, and weapons to civilians, gave inmates preferential treatment, and took property meant for the sheriff's office for himself. In return for 2 prisoners working on his property, Parker let them live and sleep outside the jail. With the former sheriff's knowledge, the prisoners had access to phones, the internet, and an unlimited number of unattended visitors while they were sleeping in the armory. Additionally, prosecutors claimed that Parker provided special treatment to jail inmates, including alcohol and unsupervised visits with women. They were permitted to eat at restaurants and shop. The prisoners allegedly worked on the home and personal belongings of the former sheriff in return. The former sheriff was put on trial as a result. Mike Lee, who was serving a 15-year sentence for arson, testified against the former sheriff during Parker's trial. According to Lee's testimony, he was able to outfit his cell with a refrigerator, a new mattress, and flat-screen TVs while he was incarcerated in Chesterfield County. Lee used his own funds that were sent by family to buy the items. In addition to being permitted to buy and wear ordinary clothing rather than his jail uniform, Lee informed jurors that he would have lunch with deputies. Lee claimed to have had access to phones, the internet, and a Facebook account while working at one of the county's impound lots. Lee eventually left the jail to live in the sheriff's armory, where he hosted a birthday party where guests drank alcohol and ate filet mignon and had sex with a female visitor. Isn't it incredible that an inmate would throw a party at the sheriff's office? Post your thoughts about it in the comments section. Lee claimed that while he was in Chesterfield, he was able to visit his wife and child in Mount Pleasant by private jet from Charleston. Lee also testified that a deputy in a marked sheriff's car took him and another prisoner to Florence, South Carolina, so they could have lunch with a female friend. By working at Parker's house, attending church with Parker, and giving Parker's daughter presents, Lee described how he got to know Parker very well. Parker was convicted in 2014 of 5 counts of official misconduct, 2 counts of providing prisoners with contraband, and 1 count of embezzlement. He received a 2-year prison sentence with the possibility of release. The former sheriff broke down in tears as the judge was about to sentence Parker, expressing regret to his family, friends, and the residents of Chesterfield County. Parker expressed regret to his family for embarrassing them and to his fellow police officers following the verdict. Miller confessed to the crime and guided the police to Hope Melton's body after being questioned by Sheriff Sam Parker, as I previously stated. Miller was facing the death penalty, but prosecutors were unable to pursue it due to the sheriff's actions. In actuality, the sheriff assured Miller during the interrogation that he would not be executed if he confessed to the crime and told Hope Melton what had happened. Making such a promise to a suspect was beyond the sheriff's authority. Miller confessed to the crime because he trusted the sheriff. Sheriff Parker jeopardized the case by doing this. Former Chesterfield County Sheriff Sam Parker seriously jeopardized the case, according to a statement from Solicitor Dan Johnson. Johnson claimed that Miller's confession was obtained by Sheriff Parker under the false pretense that he would not pursue the death penalty. Johnson stated in the release that all statements made in reliance on Sam Parker's promise of leniency, which was used to coerce Nicholas Miller's confession, would be appropriately suppressed at a trial in this case due to Parker's egregious misconduct. Nicholas Miller, age 26, entered a guilty plea to all charges in March 2015. He received a life sentence without the chance of release. The former sheriff, who had been found guilty of corruption the previous year and had seriously jeopardized the case, infuriated Hope Melton's family. Elizabeth, Hope's mother, expressed their disappointment, saying they had hoped Miller would be executed. According to the family, they have yet to receive an apology from Parker. They will continue to fight for justice and preserve Hope Melton's legacy in the interim. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. After making a late-night roadside help call in January 2013, 26-year-old Texas father Brandon Mason Lawson disappeared. When his car was discovered abandoned, what had started out as a typical night took an enigmatic turn. Brandon's voice shook in terror as he called 911 in a panic, whispering that he was being pursued and desperately needed assistance. Brandon remained a mystery despite a great deal of searching and investigation, leaving his friends and family in a desperate search for answers. What actually transpired that evening, and who was he fleeing from? Let's investigate the enigma. Brandon Lawson was an oil field worker from San Angelo, Texas at the time of his disappearance. According to reports, he was a devoted partner to his girlfriend, Ladessa Lofton, whom he had dated for 10 years, and a loving father to 4 children. Ladessa was the stepmother of Brandon's oldest daughter and the mother of their 3 children. Brandon's recent drug relapse, which resulted in his inexplicable absences, caused Ladessa great concern. Their bond was forged over years of shared experiences and the difficulties of raising a family together, despite the usual ups and downs in their relationship. But Brandon, like a lot of young people, had his share of difficulties. He had previously abused drugs, particularly methamphetamines. But according to reports, he had been clean for roughly 6 months prior to the night of his disappearance. His friends and family knew him as a strong, industrious man who was trying to change his life. However, he had previously been overcome by the hold of addiction, and he was burdened by the strain of juggling his demanding work in the oil industry with his family life. The events leading to Brandon's disappearance began on the evening of August 8, 2013, when he and Ledessa got into a fight. It started off like any other evening. After a long day of work, Brandon got home in San Angelo between 10:45 and 11 p.m. Brandon and Ledessa got into a heated argument. Although it was initially unclear what specifically started the argument, Ledessa later disclosed that she became irritated and suspicious when Brandon failed to come home the night before. After the argument grew more heated, Brandon made the decision to leave the house at 11:30 p.m. About 3 hours' drive from San Angelo, he called his father and said he was coming to his home in Crowley, Texas. He left Ledessa behind and climbed into his silver Ford F-150 at 11:54 p.m. At the time, she didn't think much of it and assumed he would calm down and come back. Ledessa later reflected on the altercation in a 2018 interview, explaining that it was caused by a number of factors. The recent birth of their youngest son, which created additional stressors between them, and Brandon's rigorous work schedule, which involved more than 60 hours per week, were major contributing factors. Ledessa acknowledged the emotional weight of her words and conveyed her sincere regret for the argument. She acknowledged that she put a lot of the blame on herself. The memory of their most recent altercation still plagued her, and she remarked, "I will never get those words back." Brandon called his brother Kyle at around 12:30 a.m. on August 9 to let him know that he had run out of gas on Highway 277 close to the tiny town of Bronte. The town of Bronte is surrounded by a broad, rocky region of desert and hills. It is surrounded by rough, harsh terrain, including dry riverbeds, rocky outcrops, and steep hills. There aren't many people living there, and it's secluded. There aren't many services in the area, and cell phone service is scarce. During the night, the sky is so dark that only the stars can be seen. The wind is the only thing breaking the heavy silence. Being stuck in a location like this can quickly turn into a major issue. Brandon Lawson experienced precisely this on the evening of August 9, 2013. Just outside of Bronte, on Highway 277, his truck ran out of gas. All of a sudden, he found himself isolated in a remote location, vulnerable to the hostile surroundings. All he could do was wait for his brother. Kyle remembered that Brandon sounded uncontrollable during one of their calls. He informed Kyle that he was being pursued, which clearly caused concern. Brandon clarified that the Mexicans in the neighborhood were pursuing him when Kyle asked for more information. Kyle, still perplexed, inquired as to whether Brandon was hallucinating as a result of drug use, but Brandon denied it. Kyle didn't know what was happening, but he was worried. In order to assist Brandon, he hurried to Ledessa's house with his wife and their 4-year-old child to get a fuel can. Kyle continued to try to contact his brother while they were driving. However, Brandon never seemed able or willing to engage in a full conversation when they spoke. Kyle tried his hardest to communicate and gain a comprehensive understanding of Brandon's predicament, but their brief and fragmented exchanges added mystery to an already perplexing situation. One of the most important and perplexing pieces of evidence in the case is the distressing 911 call that Brandon made at 12:50 a.m. Due to routing errors, the 911 call was sent to a nearby nursing home in Robert Lee, Texas. Brandon's voice was erratic and panicked during the call. Some phrases stood out among his difficult-to-understand words. The dispatcher tried to question Brandon, who was obviously perplexed by the call, but his answers were jumbled and ambiguous. He appeared to be in a panic and said that he was being chased into the woods and that he needed help right away. Even though the call was unclear, it was clear that Brandon was upset and thought someone was chasing him. The phone logs that precede Brandon's disappearance are broken down as follows. Kyle left a voicemail at 12:51 a.m. after Brandon claimed he was being pursued. After their argument, Brandon attempted to call Ledessa, but was unsuccessful because she had left her phone in her car. When Kyle's wife called Brandon as well, and Kyle called him again without getting a response, the urgency increased. Brandon called his neighbor at 12:57 a.m., but this did not provide any answers. Brandon was contacted by a nursing home dispatcher regarding his previous 911 call at 1:04 a.m. Brandon then called Kyle 3 more times at 1:09 a.m. He informed Kyle that he was bleeding while running through a field during one of these calls. In a subsequent interview, Kyle stated that he didn't believe Brandon was gravely injured. He thought his brother had just tripped or been in a small mishap. Brandon then called Kyle one last time at 1:15 a.m. This would be the final calls he made from his phone before it became silent. That night is depicted as chaotic by this series of calls. Brandon was obviously in distress and was attempting to contact his neighbor, brother, girlfriend, and even 911. However, meaningful communication was almost impossible because of bad cell reception, his panic, and perhaps the hazardous and dark terrain. The uncertainty surrounding his last moments was further compounded by the confusion between his calls and his family's efforts to find him. When a truck driver called to report that Brandon's truck was parked dangerously on the side of the road, a Coke County Sheriff's deputy arrived at the scene at around 1 a.m. Kyle had also arrived at the scene by the time the deputy did, but Brandon was nowhere to be seen. During a phone conversation with Kyle at 1:18 a.m., Brandon claimed to be able to see both Kyle and the deputy from his hiding place, saying, "I can see you. I'm right here." However, neither Kyle nor the deputy were able to see Brandon anywhere near the truck or the surrounding area, which further complicated the situation. Kyle believed Brandon was attempting to elude the police because he had an active warrant for his arrest in Johnson County on a charge of drug possession with intent to deliver. Brandon didn't want to be caught, he reasoned, especially since the deputy was already there. Kyle and the deputy didn't have all the information necessary to comprehend what was actually going on because they were unaware that Brandon had called 911 earlier. Later, Kyle stated that he didn't believe he was in danger. Kyle made the decision to drive a short distance up the road after speaking with the deputy. After the deputy left, he parked farther down in the hopes that Brandon would emerge from hiding. After waiting there for 30 to 45 minutes, Kyle decided that everything was okay and departed for San Angelo. When Brandon failed to appear, Kyle went back to the location where his truck had run out of gas at around 5 in the morning on August 9. Once more, Brandon failed to show up when he called for his brother. A deputy reported that a small private search team had been assembled to find Brandon on August 11. A few days later, they searched until about noon without discovering anything significant, having begun at about 8 a.m. The only hint they found was a tiny spot beneath a tree where it appeared someone had taken a seat. This location was visible from his truck and near the road. There were no additional indications of Brandon or his whereabouts, despite Kyle and the search team's best efforts, leaving his family with more questions than answers. Many theories have been proposed in the years following Brandon's disappearance. Some stem from the peculiarity of his last phone conversations, while others are based on the case's facts. The notion that Brandon might have been the victim of foul play is one of the most talked about theories. There has been conjecture that Brandon came into contact with someone or something dangerous on the evening of August 9, 2013, after he reported being chased into the woods in his 911 call. Some have even proposed that drug use may have played a role. People question whether Brandon was in danger, possibly a drug deal gone wrong or a run-in with violent people while stuck on the highway, given that he had used methamphetamines just before the incident. But this theory is called into question by the paucity of evidence. There were no reports of other cars in the vicinity at the time, and no evidence of a struggle was discovered close to his truck. Many people were left wondering whether foul play was involved, where it occurred, and who was involved, because the scene surrounding the truck was oddly undisturbed. The idea that Brandon may have intentionally vanished is another theory that has gained some traction. At the time, his life was complicated. Maybe he took extreme action because of his tumultuous relationship with his girlfriend, personal problems, and legal troubles. According to some, Brandon might have taken advantage of the circumstance to flee his life and start over somewhere else. There is some circumstantial evidence to support this theory. The key to Brandon's pickup truck, which had been left partially over the white line on the road, was in his possession, alone. Law enforcement started looking into the incident shortly after the truck was towed on August 9, 2013, at around 8 a.m. Assigned to the case, Deputy Neal looked for indications of activity at a number of nearby properties. The deputy wanted to find out if Brandon might have sought shelter or water on any of these properties, many of which were only used during certain seasons, but Neal couldn't find any evidence that Brandon had been there. After LaDessa formally reported missing on August 13, Texas Ranger Nick Hanna, who was now in charge of the case, searched the area in a helicopter. Brandon was nowhere to be seen when they flew over the area close to Highway 277 and the Colorado River. One intriguing finding from the helicopter search was that there was enough exposed ground for someone who was lying down or hiding to have probably been seen from above. Deputies came to the conclusion that Brandon Lawson had left Coke County as a result of this. The deputy wrote in his final report that he didn't think Brandon was hiding or lost in the area. He based his conclusion on several factors. According to Kyle Lawson, Brandon was probably hiding in the brush close to his truck so the deputy wouldn't find him. Nevertheless, the truck and its surroundings showed no indications of foul play. Above all, Brandon and Ledessa's text messages from the night of his disappearance suggested a furious dispute. Neil thought Brandon most likely walked back to the road and hitched a ride from a passing car after he and Kyle left the scene. The idea that Brandon purposefully vanished has only grown stronger as a result of his ongoing absence over the years. The region was going through a serious drought when he vanished. They were able to identify small items like corn sacks from the air during aerial searches. They could have easily seen Brandon if he had been on the ground. In addition, the river in the region was incredibly low, only reaching knee-deep in its deepest sections. These circumstances implied that Brandon would have been discovered during their searches if he had been in the region. Brandon's active warrant for possession with intent to deliver was also mentioned by the deputy as a potential explanation for his disappearance. He surmised that Brandon might have chosen to flee in order to stay out of legal hot water. The fact that Brandon cashed in his $401,000 with Renegade Oil Services shortly before going missing, potentially as part of a disappearance plan, lends more credence to this theory. Kyle Lawson was asked to meet with Sheriff McCutcheon, Ranger Hanna, and a Johnson County investigator at the same location where Brandon's warrant had been issued several months after Brandon vanished. They interrogated Kyle about his role, asking whether he had hurt or assisted his brother in getting away. In the end, Kyle asked for a polygraph to clear his name. Kyle claims that he passed the test on hurting his brother, despite some inconsistencies brought on by coughing during the exam. The accidental death or lost in the wilderness theory is another explanation for his disappearance. Arid and rocky, Highway 277 is home to cacti, thorny bushes, and dangerous creatures like wild hogs and rattlesnakes. This belief appears to be supported by the thorough searches that have been conducted, but every lead has ended in disappointment, with no sign of him. According to the final theory, Brandon's recent use of methamphetamines may have caused him to suffer from drug-induced hallucinations or paranoia. Severe paranoia, disorientation, and unpredictable conduct are all possible side effects of methamphetamine, especially if the user has been up for a long time. Brandon may have fled into the wilderness in a confused state, and his references to people chasing him may have been the product of a drug-induced hallucination. The term paranoia describes a strong mistrust or fear of other people, frequently coupled with illogical ideas or convictions that someone or something is trying to hurt them. Even when there are no actual external threats, paranoia in the context of drug use can show up as an elevated sense of threat or danger. Brandon's strange phone calls may be explained by this theory, but it doesn't address the question of what happened to him after he fled his truck. Did the weather get to him? Did he get stuck somewhere inaccessible or fall into a ravine? His family was left in a difficult position after Brandon Lawson vanished, caught between hope and the harsh realities of life. Brad Lawson, his father, struggles with mixed feelings. He is plagued by nightmares in which Brandon is still alive, possibly coerced into slave labor by a cartel, even though he is aware that the likelihood of Brandon surviving is remote. The possibility of foul play seems limitless, and Brad can't get rid of the thought that his son might still be out there somewhere. Is it possible that Brandon was being followed that evening? Did he encounter death when he entered private property? Or was it a crime of opportunity, where someone walked by, saw his weakness, and took advantage of him? Lisa Lofton can't stand the uncertainty. She worries that her kids won't ever know what happened to their father when they grow up, get married, or even start a family of their own. She is troubled by the memory of that night, particularly the altercation they had before he vanished. She battles this guilt every day after hurtful words were exchanged. The odd 911 call Brandon made that evening serves as their final connection to him. It serves as a painful reminder of his last moments for Ledessa and her kids. His 2 older daughters try to understand his words as they listen to the recording on YouTube, but it only makes their heartache worse. Brad is adamant that his son did not simply flee. He contends that Brandon was not forced to leave his family because the arrest warrant was insufficient. Brandon was always prepared to accept the consequences because he had previously dealt with legal issues. He actually had plans for the future, including beginning a new job the Monday after his disappearance that would pay more and come with the fact that none of Brandon's possessions, including his phone, wallet, keys, or even his shoes, have ever been located only serves to further complicate matters. How someone could vanish so totally without leaving any trace is beyond his brother's comprehension. The family's suspicion that foul play was involved is only strengthened by this. Ledessa is hopeful that someone will eventually come forward because she thinks that someone out there is aware of what happened to Brandon. She is still plagued by unresolved questions, such as the identity of the dispatcher who spoke to Brandon that evening and the trucker who reported his pickup. Ledessa thinks that these individuals may possess important hints that could ultimately clarify what transpired. Ledessa can't help but notice the ominous tone of Brandon's 911 call, even though she tells herself that his disappearance might have been an accident. She finds it hard to accept that someone would hurt the man she cherished so much. Help Find Brandon Lawson, a Facebook page created by Brandon Lawson's friends and family, has received a lot of support and attention since it was created. The page has more than 2,000 followers as of 2024, indicating that Brandon's unsolved disappearance has generated a lot of interest and concern. This website is a vital resource for disseminating news, details, and appeals pertaining to Brandon's case. It gives Brandon's family members a place to communicate with supporters, reminisce about Brandon, and coordinate efforts to keep his story in the public eye. The page encourages anyone with information regarding Brandon's whereabouts or the circumstances surrounding his disappearance to come forward, and plays a crucial part in the ongoing search for answers. Paula Boudreau, Ledessa's hired private investigator, has also been putting in a lot of effort to find hints. The sizable community that follows the Help Find Brandon Lawson Facebook page frequently provides her with leads. Boudreau has encountered challenges while searching the land with cadaver dogs and helicopters. On their property, some landowners have refused to permit searches. Prior to 2022, there had been no leads or noteworthy advancements in the hunt for Brandon Lawson. But at Brandon's last known location, a small search team made a breakthrough in early 2022. They notified the authorities after finding a pile of his clothing. Human remains were discovered nearby shortly after. The Help Find Brandon Lawson Facebook page announced in October 2023 that the clothing discovered and initial DNA results suggested the remains were probably Brandon's. To compare the genetic markers from the remains with Brandon's father's DNA, more tests were being conducted. The Texas Ranger in charge of the case said he was cautiously optimistic that the remains would be identified. There have been no new developments regarding the identification as of October 2024. 11 years have passed since Brandon vanished, and his family is still looking for answers. Unfortunately, because of their advanced state of decomposition, these remains have not yet been definitively identified, leaving little material for identification. A portion of the remains are destroyed each time a sample is taken out and examined. For upcoming DNA testing, it is therefore imperative to preserve as much as possible. In an attempt to extract enough DNA, the remains have been sent to 2 labs, but the results have been negative thus far. The family is unable to provide additional information regarding the investigation's current status or the other options the Texas Rangers were considering in June 2023 for identifying the remains. The finding of Brandon Lawson's remains is likely to put an end to the tragic and enigmatic case of his disappearance. Even with this possible resolution, there are still a lot of unsolved questions regarding what happened that evening. Even though they are thankful for some closure, his family might never find all the answers they are looking for. The anguish of not knowing a loved one's fate and the unpredictability of life are both highlighted in Brandon's story. It highlights the necessity of continual enhancements to search and rescue operations, particularly in isolated regions such as West Texas. The memories of Brandon Lawson will live on in the hearts of his loved ones and everyone who has followed his tragic story, even though the whole truth may never be known. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Sometime between 7 and 7:30 p.m. on the evening of May 30, 2012, 19-year-old Britney Wood got ready and left her mother's home in Mobile, Alabama. Everyone thought Britney was going to see a friend, but that wasn't the case at all. Britney's real destination was her uncle Donnie Holland's house, but no one around her knew it. But what started out as a routine visit would turn into a terrifying experience for the family and the police. On June 1, 2012, 2 days later, the police discovered something horrifying. A terrifying crime scene was revealed when Donnie, Britney's uncle, was discovered in his car with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. A layer of mystery was added by the startling and bloody scene, which grew more intense as Britney Wood mysteriously disappeared. Did Britney contribute to Donnie's demise, and, if so, what motivated her to act in that way? Or did someone else kidnap Britney in addition to killing Donnie? Britney's dream has always been to work as a hairdresser and eventually open her own salon. But the little girl, who was only a teenager, would meet a man named Andy Woods. As their relationship grew, their lovely daughter Peyton was joyfully born in 2009, when Britney was only 18. At first, Britney relished the independence of youth, but the arrival of Peyton marked a significant shift in her life. But when Andy and Britney split up a few months after Peyton was born, her life took an even more dramatic turn. In spite of the split, the couple decided to share custody in order to keep their relationship cordial and beneficial for their daughter's welfare. Following this, Britney started dating and had a number of short-lived relationships. Spending time with her family, especially her brother Derek, whom she viewed as her protector, brought Britney joy. When Britney looks back on her past, she realizes that her turbulent experiences also stemmed from her early years. When she was a baby, her mother, Chessie Wood, and her father, Wallace Hinckley, got divorced. Britney and her father had a good relationship in spite of the divorce. The primary issue, though, was her relationship with her uncle, Donnie Holland. Donnie was always kind to people around him and seemed like a fun-loving guy, but his story was more complicated than it seemed on the surface. In fact, Donnie was being investigated at the time of his death for his alleged involvement in a child abuse ring that involved other family members, including Britney's household members. Is there a link between Donnie's eventual death and everything that happened in the past and Britney's disappearance? Around 7:30 p.m. on the evening of May 30, 2012, Britney left her home, leading her family to believe she was going to see a friend. Later that evening, they tried to get in touch with Britney but were unsuccessful. At first, the family didn't suspect anything was wrong because they were used to her spending days with her friends. However, they were unaware that this was not one of those evenings because they did not know where Britney was. 2 days later, on June 3, 2012, Britney's uncle Donnie Holland was discovered in his car, the engine still running, in a remote location with a view of the Fish River. The family was met with a terrifying discovery. He was shot behind his ear, at the back of his head. After being taken to a nearby hospital, he had already died. After hearing this heartbreaking news, Britney's family made another effort to get in touch with her and let her know about the tragedy. Sadly, their efforts were unsuccessful because her phone was dead and still unresponsive. The family became increasingly worried when they couldn't find Britney at her regular hangouts. They quickly made their way to the Mobile County Police Station and reported the missing person. This sparked a number of inquiries that involved Britney and Donnie. The police searched the crime scene thoroughly in hopes of finding any evidence that would help them solve the case quickly. After a thorough search, they found a phone battery and a small gun inside the vehicle. Chessie, Britney's mother, said that bags had been placed on Donnie's hands while she was in the hospital, most likely to be tested for gunshot residue. Why these bags were taken out without being tested is still unknown, though. Along with the investigation, the police spoke with Wendy Holland, Donnie's wife, and Jennifer Gonzalez Moore, their friend, who found Donnie's body. When they discovered Donnie about a mile from the main road, they said he was still gushing blood. The reason for their search and the details of the interrogation, such as whether Donnie was still alive, are still unknown. There was a strong suspicion, though, that Wendy was somehow involved in this incident. Presuming the gun was the one used to shoot Donnie, the police collected it along with the phone battery, but when Britney's best friend, Tiffany Bailey, acknowledged that the gun was Britney's, things took an unexpected turn. Tiffany disclosed that just before she vanished, Britney had bought the gun for protection. Suspicions were running high and people started wondering if Britney or Wendy and her friend were involved. But there was still another way to look at the story. Donnie was being investigated at the time of his death for allegedly being a part of a troubling child abuse ring that involved multiple members of his own family. He died from a gunshot wound while sitting in his car just half an hour before he was supposed to meet with the investigators to talk about these claims. According to former Baldwin County Sheriff's Office Detective Eric Winberg, Donnie probably expected to be arrested and killed himself just before the scheduled police meeting. The search for the truth started amid the assumptions and suspicions. Examining phone records was the first step in the investigation. The battery that was discovered in Donnie's vehicle turned out to be that of Britney's cell phone. Additionally, it was verified by the call logs that Donnie and Britney actually met on May 30, 2012, the day she vanished. According to the documents, Donnie had driven Britney to the house near Styx River after picking her up at her mobile home. Britney's text logs showed that she was messaging non-stop until 11:30 p.m., when she suddenly stopped. Early on May 31, they arrived back at Mobile, just as her phone died, ending the opportunity to gather any more information. As a result of these disclosures, the police force's investigation into Britney took extreme action. Volunteers, the search and rescue team, helicopters, dogs, and boats were all mobilized in the ensuing extensive search. The Styx River Basin, the last place Britney's phone had pinged, was within a 5-mile radius of the operation. The intensive efforts produced no evidence of her whereabouts, even after multiple interviews with her friends and family. Britney's daughter, meanwhile, yearned to see her mother. But after the search for Britney was unsuccessful, attention returned to Wendy. Police reported that Wendy was seen removing items from Donnie's phone the day he was found dead, which may indicate an effort to hide something that was first disregarded. When the investigation came to a standstill and the police began to focus again on Wendy, this action took on greater significance. The case came to a standstill after the car's DNA results produced no solid proof. Eventually, there was no more evidence to connect anyone to Donnie Holland's murder. As a result, it was formally declared a suicide, and the case was closed. Many questions and controversy were raised by the decision to close the case as a suicide. Detective Eric Winberg confirmed that the gunshot residue test was not performed because it was a procedure carried out by the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences. Becca Johnson, a private investigator who was actively involved in the search for Britney Wood, expressed skepticism, saying, "Generally it's 4 to 5 hours till unpreserved gunshot residue is gone and, hands in bags, it's being preserved." Cameron Busey, a firearms expert at the time, noted that if Donnie had shot himself, the bone fragments and brain matter would have probably lodged in his hands. To ascertain this aspect as well, no test was carried out. Furthermore, Busey emphasized that it would be extremely uncommon to hold the gun behind one's head. "I don't know of any suicide that was done in that position." Nevertheless, in spite of numerous worries and observations, suicide was officially declared the cause of death, and no hard evidence surfaced to refute this finding. Even though Donnie's case ended in a surprising way, the investigation went further to understand its complexities by looking into the possibility that a family member was involved in the crime. The family had been concealing a troubling past for years, but the investigations revealed it. They discovered that Donnie Holland was the leader of a child abuse ring in which at least 11 other friends or family members participated. For decades, they had been mistreating and taking advantage of children, including their own. Further evidence connecting the family to these allegations was found by the police as they looked through Britney's Facebook profile. 11 family members were arrested for their roles in the abuse ring, including Donnie's wife Wendy and Britney's adored brother Derek. The fact that Britney's mother, Chessie, was charged with child abuse despite claiming innocence only served to heighten the seriousness of the situation. One of the accusations against the mother was that she had assaulted another female relative who was underage. As the investigation went on, details from Britney's friends, whom she had confided in, came to light. It was revealed that when Britney was only 9 years old, she had also been abused by Donnie. Britney's friends claim that she intended to confront Donnie and report him to the police. An important question was brought up by the revelation. Did Britney kill Donnie in retaliation? Although the hypothesis had an interesting history, it was only speculative because there was no hard evidence to support it. Given the backstory and her subsequent disappearance, particularly after her gun was discovered, the audience might have assumed in a simpler plot or motive that Britney was the cause of Donnie's death. However, evidence is crucial in legal proceedings, and no additional inquiry into her involvement was conducted in the absence of adequate proof. In addition to the idea that Britney was seeking retribution, another theory surfaced. Could a previous victim have killed Donnie in retaliation and then abducted Britney? Although the reason behind Britney's abduction was never revealed, her mysterious disappearance raised suspicions that she was still alive. Despite a number of theories, it was indisputable that Britney's family was about to face legal repercussions. Still, Britney's mother, Chessie, was upset that her daughter had not yet been found. A young victim testified against Wendy Holland, Donnie's wife, in court on December 9, 2014. The victim's first memories of abuse by adult relatives, including the defendant Wendy Wood Holland, who was 35 at the time, were horrifyingly described in the testimony. The teenage girl testified that the relatives frequently participated in adult group activities, mentioning that Britney Wood occasionally participated in these activities. During the biggest case in Alabama, which involved the prosecution of 10 people. Teresa Hines, the prosecutor, inquired as to how frequently such incidents happened. The answer was, it happened a bunch, according to testimony from a man who subsequently entered a guilty plea. He once engaged in an inappropriate six-way encounter with a group of relatives, which included Wendy Holland and the girl. Derek Wood, Britney Wood's 23-year-old brother, entered a guilty plea to the charge of having inappropriate contact with the victim. He claimed to have interacted inappropriately with Wendy Holland too many times to count, beginning when he was about 13 years old. Derek was imprisoned for 3 years after his case was sealed, and he was classified as a juvenile offender. As a defendant in a related case, Britney's mother, Chessie Wood, who was also charged with child abuse, showed up at court with her son but was denied entry. She also said outright that her relatives were at fault. During his testimony, Dustin Kent, the brother-in-law of Wendy Holland, claimed to have participated in a six-way inappropriate encounter between Wendy, the alleged teen victim, and his wife Wendy Kent, Wendy Holland's twin sister. Dustin Kent, who also entered a guilty plea to sex charges, claimed that in October 2011, he first saw Wendy Holland having inappropriate relations with the alleged victim. Dustin Kent entered a second guilty plea in Mobile County 1 week after the first one, this time for assault and sodomy charges stemming from inappropriate interactions with 2 separate 13-year-old family members in 2008. He received a 17-year prison sentence. After that, Britney's other uncle, Randall Scott Wood, pled guilty in Mobile County. All of the defendants were found guilty on charges of child abuse in quick succession. Wendy's identical twin sister, Mindy Kent, was also imprisoned after being found guilty by Mobile County jurors of sodomy and child abuse under the age of 12. She received a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison in 2015, with 20 years for each count against her. Wendy Holland was given a startling sentence of 219 years in prison in 2015 after being found guilty of child abuse and child torture. Chessie Wood, Britney's mother, also acknowledged guilt to a misdemeanor charge of endangering the welfare of her child. There is still debate surrounding the conclusion that Donnie Holland committed suicide. There is still no conclusive answer to the important question of whether Britney was the criminal. But beneath this mask, one thing is certain. After years of hiding these forbidden activities, Britney Wood's troubled family finally received the punishment they deserved. In the end, justice had won out. Only one person can now provide us with the truth about the disappearance or the murderous night. But over 10 years have gone by, and she is still elusive, and no one knows where she is. What are your thoughts on this unsettling case, then? What might have occurred the night Donnie died? Was there something more sinister going on? Or was it truly a disappearance leading to suicide? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, What part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Arthur Labinjo-Hughes, then 7 years old, would give up on life at this very moment. 5 hours later, the world would hear the most tragic story on the internet, that of Arthur Labinjo-Hughes, after an emergency 999 call was placed. He was discovered in a state that could not be explained by a fall, even though he had fallen and struck his head. He was remembered for his superpower, his smile. If one could ask for one last thing, despite having numerous guardian angels around him, Arthur was imprisoned by pure evil during COVID-19 and spent every day of his life in hell. Soon, the Midlands, England Police Department would find horrifying hidden footage and videos that they would prefer not to view. June 17, 2020 was the date of the call. The voice on the line was panicked. 6-year-old Arthur Labinjo-Hughes had fallen down the stairs. When paramedics arrived, he was having trouble breathing. Arthur's life slipped away in spite of all the attempts to save him. Before the doctors noticed something that would haunt them for years, it appeared to be a tragic accident. Horrible injuries were found, which contradicted the caller's account. Arthur's severe brain injuries had caused his death. According to the doctors, the damage was comparable to an automobile accident. Even the on-scene paramedics observed numerous bruises on his body, in addition to severe head trauma. Amidst the frantic words and background noise of the 999 call, the truth was concealed in plain sight. Everyone would be shocked to learn the true story of Arthur's tragic demise when the recording was played again, this time with more discerning ears and a greater sense of suspicion. Something much darker now echoed what had once seemed like desperation. Emma Tustin, 32, the stepmother and caregiver of 6-year-old Arthur Labinjo-Hughes, was the female voice on the call. Emma was the only person who saw Arthur's final moments because his father, 29-year-old Thomas Hughes, was not there when the alleged accident happened. She was also the one who explained how Arthur got hurt and escorted him to the hospital. However, there was a problem with the doctors. They called the police because of their suspicions, and detectives soon began requesting Emma's first formal statement. The thinking step was the punishment area that Arthur's stepmother Emma and father Thomas had created for him. He could stand there and think about what he had done. Because of his actions, Arthur often found himself there, Emma said. However, Arthur was particularly impolite and violent on the night of June 17, 2020, the day he passed away. Emma started crying as she described the mischievous child who had mistreated her. She asserted, like many other stepmothers, that her love was not returned. However, the narrative did not match Emma's story, which remained mostly unchanged from the details in the 999 call. Although more research was necessary, the results would reveal a disturbing truth that would haunt the investigators for the rest of their careers. By 1 a.m., Arthur was placed on life support. After determining that there was nothing more that could be done, life support was turned off the next day. A forensic analysis conducted as the investigation progressed showed that Arthur had more than 130 distinct wounds, from head to toe, in varying stages of recovery. Each and every part of his small body was injured and bruised. Long-term physical stress caused his thymus gland and one kidney to shrink significantly. However, a total detachment of the retina in his right eye and bleeding on the brain were the cause of death. The experts had no idea that this was only the beginning. He had extremely high sodium levels when he was first brought to the hospital. These levels did not change 7 hours later, suggesting that his body was unable to adequately absorb the excess salt he had consumed. According to estimates, Arthur would have needed to eat 6 tablespoons of salt in a single day, or more likely, be poisoned with high amounts of salt over a number of days to reach such sodium levels. Torture was evident from the autopsy report and the injuries sustained. However, that wasn't even the reason this case was the most well-known in Middleton. It was the horrifying findings that had not yet been made during the inquiry that had the public's attention like a wildfire. Authorities were tracking down the sadistic monster who had committed the unthinkable after discovering the unspeakable horror inflicted upon the defenseless child. Behind the story of the tearful Emma and the restless Thomas, there was little question that something was amiss. Across the nation, rumors were circulating, but it quickly became clear that these were more than just conjectures. Discovering the atrocities that had taken place behind the scenes was the difficult part. A search warrant for Emma's two-bedroom home, where she lived with her boyfriend Thomas Hughes and their children from prior marriages, was swiftly obtained by the Middleton police. Apart from a CCTV camera placed in the living room, nothing seemed especially noteworthy at first glance. Investigators were informed by Emma and Thomas that it was done to keep an eye on Arthur and make sure he didn't hurt himself. The investigators were unaware that the recordings held terrible secrets they would have preferred to ignore when they took them for additional analysis. Heartbreaking details of little Arthur's last hours were captured on CCTV, including scenes that would have horrified anyone who saw them. This unsettling video was captured just a few hours prior to Arthur's purported mishap. Arthur pleaded with Blake to come and save his life. Who were these individuals that Arthur was depending on in the final stages of his life? Blake was Thomas Hughes's brother and Arthur's uncle. When Arthur called for his family outside of Emma and Thomas, he was seen to be weak, frail, and hardly standing. Detectives contacted Arthur's grandparents and Uncle Blake during the hours that these recordings were being examined. In addition to being open, the family had a lot to share. The date of Arthur's birth was January 4, 2014. He was among the happiest kids you could ever meet just a year ago. He was a huge supporter of Birmingham City Football Club and loved superheroes. Those who knew him said he was intelligent and vivacious, but as the grandparents dug deeper, it became evident that Arthur was a contented but unlucky child. Thomas and Olivia Labinjo-Hughes, who met while engaging in drug activities, are his parents. Olivia entered a new toxic relationship with Arthur after the parents divorced, but Arthur stayed with her. She had taken an alcohol awareness course and met a man named Gary Cunningham. Gary and Olivia both used violence against one another. In February 2019, this toxic relationship tragically came to a head when Olivia killed Gary by stabbing him 12 times while intoxicated. The fact that young Arthur saw the murder was the most startling aspect of this incident. Olivia received an 11-year sentence in 2020. Little Arthur moved in with his father, Thomas, and grandparents while the mother was serving her sentence. His grandparents and his uncle Blake were the main sources of the love he had experienced. For Arthur, this was the safest period of his life. The trail of misfortune started with a simple date, but the wave of good times would soon subside. Thomas, his father, went on a date with Emma Tustin, a woman he had met online. Detectives discovered that Emma had a history of unpredictable and attention-seeking behavior as the investigation progressed. When her boyfriend threatened to break up with her in 2013, she leaped from the top of a multi-story parking structure. She once threw herself out of a bedroom window to stop her partner and his best friend from going to the pub. In an interview with the Daily Mail, one of her ex-boyfriends stated, "She's a black widow. Every man she hangs out with is sucked dry by her. She has absolutely no maternal instinct. She wanted children because of the attention they gave her as a newborn and the benefits they provided. But she didn't want to know once the attention stopped and she was left alone with a baby." She was also accused of being a careless mother, and social services frequently visited her home. The ultimate application of this woman's evil would be when she entered Thomas's, and eventually Arthur's, life. Thomas wasn't a perfect father, but he wasn't a total nightmare either. But as he and Emma became closer, that would soon change, and Arthur would lose his father in a way he never could have predicted. Arthur went on a number of excursions with his father and Emma, but each time he came back, the grandparents noticed that he was becoming less and less eager to accompany them. He couldn't quite understand the unnerving tension that was replacing the warmth of family. His grandparents claimed that they became aware that something was amiss in their own house. Every time Emma came to visit, Arthur would try to hide because he was afraid of her. She was disliked by Thomas's brother and parents as well, who perceived dishonesty and disdain in her. They were unable to foresee the scope of what was happening, though. When Arthur's grandmother tried to buy him a Subway sandwich during one of Emma's visits, Emma yelled at her to stop feeding him, saying it was a needless luxury. This brief interaction acted as a warning, demonstrating Emma's ease and eagerness to make choices regarding Arthur's life. She wasn't alone, though. Thomas was also acting differently. He had started to become easily agitated. Blake saw the young boy staring blankly at the wall when Thomas, for a child, it was an unusual sight. Blake tried to give him a snack to lift his spirits, but Thomas stepped in and said Arthur was being punished and shouldn't be fed. As the pandemic spread, this was only the start of a nightmare that would only get worse. A total lockdown was proclaimed by the Prime Minister. Arthur had the danger in his own house while others hunkered down to protect themselves. Separated from his cherished grandparents, he was raised by his father, Thomas, and Emma, and saw them infrequently. Things were gradually coming together for Arthur's decline. Arthur's grandmother saw a blue bruise on his shoulder during one lockdown. She took prompt action and lodged a complaint with social services, even though she was Thomas's mother. When Arthur got back to Emma and Thomas's house the next day, a social services agent called Emma and paid her a visit. But nothing was done about it. They insisted that Arthur and Emma's other 2 children looked content and healthy, and they denied that there was any bruise. But the call prior to the visit was sufficient justification for Emma to be on guard and take the required precautions to hide it, according to the grandmother. Blake tried to get in touch with the Middleton police, but sadly the officers never got through to Arthur because they believed social services was handling the case. The family made repeated attempts to enlist assistance for Arthur, but there would be no outcome. Arthur was suffering terribly, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Meanwhile, Arthur's death was being investigated more thoroughly. Though they were unsure of what might have caused Arthur's death, Arthur's grandparents and family blamed Emma and Thomas. The couple was the subject of a more thorough investigation, and the most repulsive information began to come to light. After seizing their phones, investigators started going through the data. They found shocking information in the audio recordings and text messages between Emma and Thomas. The weight of what had been concealed behind closed doors became painfully evident with every new line that appeared on the screen. Emma and Thomas's messages exposed the depth of their perverse collaboration, and they were complicit in this nightmare. The messages described Arthur's living conditions, which included physical abuse, loneliness, and hunger. Emma vented her frustrations and documented her increasing cruelty towards the boy in the majority of these texts. She punished Arthur by depriving him of food and liquids and making him stand in the hallway for hours on end. The young boy's pleas for sustenance and solace were ridiculed. He referred to his desperation as misbehavior. For Emma and Thomas, the conversations were a perverse kind of reinforcement in these messages. When Thomas wasn't home, she would frequently record Arthur's anguished cries and send Thomas audio snippets, seemingly to get his approval for her severe treatment. Thomas would reply by expressing his own annoyance with Arthur and urging her to be even harsher, telling her to just end him or recommending violent means to stop his screams. The boy was left to suffer alone in his room or cry himself hoarse in the hallway while the couple, at times, were only a few feet away from Arthur and texted, their phones buzzing with nasty conversations. Emma complained that Arthur was acting out or spoiling him because of his need for affection. Emma and Thomas talked about how Arthur should be disciplined for small transgressions or denied certain foods. Neglect was not the only form of abuse. There were numerous instances of name-calling and verbal abuse in these messages. Both sides' hatred was clearly visible in these messages. The messages made it abundantly evident that there was physical torture and intimidation in the home. Arthur had been attacked several times. According to one of the messages, Emma and Thomas had a falling out, and Emma said she could accept Thomas but not Arthur. In a stern reply, Thomas insisted that she would have to take Arthur and him together or not at all. Since Emma's rejection of Arthur only made Thomas more irate, this exchange exposed the problematic dynamics of their relationship. This tension suggested that Thomas's rage could quickly grow and result in more abuse of Arthur. One thing was certain, despite the numerous questions, Arthur was leading a miserable life and frequently going without food. For the investigators, one CCTV clip that had previously seemed unimportant took on new significance. On one of the hottest days of the year, the video showed Thomas and Emma lounging and eating ice cream. Arthur, meanwhile, was made to stand on the stairs, hot and hungry, without water, and in a bulky onesie that made him feel even more uncomfortable. Emma stooped to eat McDonald's in front of a starving Arthur, who was left defenseless in the hallway, while Thomas sat cross-legged. The question came up. Did Emma's children all experience the same level of suffering? The investigators learned from Arthur's grandparents that Emma's children were frequently abandoned and left hungry for extended periods of time, while Emma remained in her room. But Arthur's ordeal was particularly horrifying. Emma's children didn't seem to experience the same degree of abuse as Arthur in any of the video. Subsequently, Emma's kids would inform investigators that if they attempted to assist Arthur, they would also be punished. As another heartbreaking clip awaited their review, the unsettling details of this case seemed to go on forever. Arthur was seen standing and shuffle-footing in these clips. It appeared innocuous at first, until they discovered he had been upright for as long as 14 hours. Police clamped down on Thomas and Emma as the horrific details surfaced, interrogating them about Arthur and the devastating information in the recordings. The details of Thomas and Emma's accident story started to shift piece by piece, but Thomas would be the first to reveal the truth, which was even more terrifying than they already knew. Thomas admitted to them that his punishment of Arthur might have been excessive. He explained to the investigators that Emma and the family suffered as a result of Arthur's behavioral problems. Thomas was going to disclose that he had studied torture techniques used during interrogation, techniques that caused the most pain without leaving scars or bruises, even though it was difficult to comprehend what offense a 6-year-old could have committed to warrant such a punishment. What actually took place on June 17, 2020 then? But did Arthur's body simply give up after all this suffering? No. The case's reality was straightforward and cruel. In fact, the reality was even more horrible. Arthur was left behind as usual, weak and starved, while Thomas had gone to the grocery store with Emma's kids. Emma texted Thomas that Arthur was causing trouble and instructed her to discipline him, even though Arthur couldn't have done anything that she couldn't manage on her own. In a matter of hours, Emma made the decision to act independently and guided Arthur to his demise. Emma repeatedly slammed Arthur's head against the wall, knocking him out by the time Thomas got back. After several unsuccessful attempts to get Arthur to get up, Emma called 999 and told them that Arthur had beaten himself before falling. Thomas blatantly admitted to the investigators that he was to blame and that Emma ought to be released. He explained to them that Arthur died because he was unable to control him and was subsequently carried away. Emma wasn't at fault. From Middleton to Parliament, the unsettling case rocked the nation. The authorities eventually realized that Emma and Thomas had lied after Arthur died, and the injuries were obviously not self-inflicted. Both were taken into custody and accused of killing Arthur. At Emma's trial on December 3, 2021, the judge gave the following account of the deadly assault. You, Tustin, committed the last act of killing. You gave him a shake that caused his head to flex and become hyperextended on his neck while repeatedly striking it against the wall or the floor. Your degree of violence caused his body to be subjected to forces comparable to those involved in a high-speed traffic accident. Emma was found guilty of murder and given a life sentence with a minimum of 29 years in prison because of the severe and devastation of her injuries. Thomas Hughes, who did not witness the deadly assault, was convicted of manslaughter and given a 21-year prison term. It was announced in December 2020 that their sentences would be examined to determine whether they were excessively light, potentially resulting in longer terms for both. Only the two youngest of Emma's 4 children from prior relationships were still living with her when she first met Thomas. Emma had already been reported to social services multiple times by that point because of worries about the welfare of her children. But she had mastered the art of controlling these circumstances. She would use emotional strategies, crying and playing the victim whenever social services came to visit. The authorities would always depart without doing anything more. Although social services had always been mentioned in the story, their non-participation was an unexpected plot twist. How come Arthur's ongoing suffering went unnoticed despite social services getting involved in this case so early? How did social services contribute to Arthur's demise in your opinion? What, in your opinion, ought to have been done to save young Arthur from his cruel destiny? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. You just heard a 16-year-old boy make a last-ditch plea for his family's survival. Subsequent attempts to contact him were unsuccessful shortly after the call ended. The Kitsap rescue team later discovered a terrifying and unsettling scene. 3 burned bodies, 2 boys and a woman, were discovered inside the burning house. The father, John Derek Caragga, was absent from the scene though. It was highly suspicious because the father was not present, suggesting that he may have been involved in planning this gory scene. The quiet surroundings of Kitsap County were the scene of this terrifying incident, which left the community in shock and in search of answers. John Derek Caragga, 43, Christelle Lynn Caragga, 37, and their 2 teenagers, Hunter Evan Shape, 16, and Jonathan Felipe Higgins, 16, made up the Caragga family. They shared a home in Washington's Kitsap County, with the 2 teenagers from prior relationships. John and Christelle married in 2009, combining their families. But their joy was short-lived, and as their 8 years as a family were coming to an end, an unexpected guest turned everything upside down. Kitsap County, Washington, saw another ordinary Friday on January 27, 2017. The Caragga family gathered in their quaint 1-story ranch home on West Tenino Drive as evening approached. According to reports, Chris Cale had some friends at the house. While at the house, Johnny got a call and left to meet someone, informing the family that he would be back soon. Later, Johnny was back on the property, but he didn't go inside the house. They snacked and indulged in late-night activities like watching TV or browsing through their phones, just like any other family. On that fateful Friday night, however, 16-year-old Hunter Shop made a terrifying 911 call to Kitsap County dispatchers, shattering the peace of the evening. He begged authorities to come to their aid immediately. When the rescue crew finally reached the Caragga home, they were met with a somber scene. All members of the family, including Hunter Shop, had been shot and killed inside their house, which was later burned down. The community was shocked to learn of the tragedy that had occurred when they woke up on Sunday morning, January 29, 2017, to the terrifying headline, "3 people found dead in Kitsap County home after fire." The headline in the newspapers was incorrect. Homeowner missing. This made the already unsettling situation even more concerning and uncertain. Initial reports stated that the victims, a woman and 2 teenagers, had been found inside a burning house. The community was left reeling from the shock of such a violent and senseless crime after authorities confirmed that the deaths were classified as homicides. John Caragga, the homeowner, was nowhere to be found, and it was confirmed that the crime had occurred the Friday before. Authorities asked people to be on the lookout for Caragga and his truck, a brown 2005 Ford F-150, and to report any sightings. Although John was listed as missing, rumors started to circulate that he might have been complicit in the horrible crime. Public opinion was greatly influenced by the press, with headlines stoking conjecture and doubt. The reference to "someone here with a gun" only served to heighten anxiety about Caragga, but it quickly became clear that the media had erred greatly in reporting that 16-year-old Hunter Shope, who had made the upsetting 911 call before tragically passing away from his injuries, was still alive. Some startling information surfaced as investigators worked on the case, highlighting the heinousness of the crime. More than $50,000 in cash was found concealed in a strong box in the main bedroom, along with an additional $7,000 in a money bag, and shell casings, mostly 9mm, were found on the back deck. In a desperate attempt to find clues, law enforcement used every resource at their disposal to find Johnny Caragga and his truck over the course of the following few days. The ongoing investigation was eventually shaken by a significant development: the finding of John Caragga's truck. On a secluded road in North Mason County, the burned wreckage with Johnny's lifeless body inside was discovered. Authorities acted quickly after a bystander walking through the area made the discovery. The local community was asked for help by the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office, which encouraged anyone with information to come forward. The area was thoroughly examined by crime scene investigators in an effort to find any hints that could provide insight into John's death. One of the most important pieces of evidence they discovered was a single latex glove that was discovered close to the burned-out truck. Authorities appealed to residents and businesses with security cameras for any footage that might offer important insights into the case. After this discovery sparked speculation and raised questions. Lieutenant Earl Smith, the sheriff's detective, stressed the value of video evidence and urged anyone with pertinent footage to assist law enforcement. The community responded quickly to the appeal, with people coming forward to offer support in any manner they could. Although there was a collaborative spirit throughout the investigation, the specifics of John's death circumstances were still unknown. Detectives reported that there were indications of forced entry and visible damage to the gate on the road leading to the tree farm. There was a clear sign of some struggle amid the confusion and uncertainty, as if Johnny's truck had crashed through the gate. Many people were troubled by the memory of Hunter's shop. In her somber announcement, North Kitsap High School principal Megan Swayze honored Hunter's memory and urged everyone who knew him to treasure their time together. When Detective Elizabeth Lisa Gundrum was assigned to the case, a glimmer of hope appeared as the community grieved the loss of the Caragga family. Due to a severe lack of eyewitnesses and conclusive evidence, investigators began looking into the victims' personal lives. They discovered a number of perplexing but plausible motivations in the process. In essence, these were conjectures regarding the family's financial transactions and business endeavors, which fueled theories of potential illegal activity and criminal ties. The unsettling 911 call made by one of the victims was the first thing that caught investigators' attention. What prevented Hunter from bringing up the fire, or was he perplexed? This complicated an already perplexing investigation by raising questions about the timing and motivations behind the arson. Authorities had a lot of questions and uncertainties as the investigation went on. The circumstances surrounding John Caragga's kidnapping, the identity of the person or people involved, and the motivation behind the attack were all still unknown. Months went by with little improvement, but in February 2017, a breakthrough came when surveillance footage showed John Caragga purchasing cigarettes at a nearby grocery store. He appeared to be acting normally in the hours before his disappearance. Although this shed some light on his whereabouts, it produced no noteworthy leads. Then, a picture of a person of interest that was taken from surveillance footage at a Target store just days prior to the killings was made public by authorities in June 2017. Suspicions regarding their possible involvement in the crime were raised by the image, which showed a person entering the store. This demonstrated the urgency of the investigation and was the first official communication in months. Sheriff Gary Simpson confirmed that multiple people were involved in the painstakingly planned killings and underlined the need for public assistance. This made the case more complicated and led to clues regarding the suspects' intentions and relationships to the victims. Questions concerning their potential purchases and connection to the crime were raised by the request for information on the unidentified suspect who was spotted at Target 12 days prior to the killings. Could materials discovered at the crime scene or firearms purchased at the store be connected to the killings? The investigation advanced in September 2017 when Danny Kelly Jr. was identified as a person of interest. Danny had been Johnny's best man at his wedding and had been a longtime friend. According to reports, Danny and his estranged mother had a troubling encounter during which she accused him of misbehavior. According to the case report, he was arrested after repeatedly groping and approaching his mother. Authorities explained that he had not been formally charged in relation to the killings, despite his suspected involvement in the Caragga case, which caused some concern. The murders of the Caragga family were the year's most important local news story, as 2017 came to an end. An anonymous donor who gave $16,000 to Crime Stoppers, boosting the reward fund to $20,000, further stoked the community's long-standing sentiments. Investigators were determined to follow leads in the case even after Danny J. Kelly Jr.'s assault charges against his mother were dropped. Authorities published a longer version of Hunter Shop's terrifying 911 call on January 11, 2018. As they worked, investigators discovered that Danny was dressed in Bandidos motorcycle club gear in the video. Members of the motorcycle club were urged to provide information by investigators. This was an important step because investigators made Danny Kelly Jr.'s affiliation with the Bandidos motorcycle club public and named him as a person of interest. For those who don't know, law enforcement and intelligence organizations in several nations have identified the Bandidos motorcycle club as a motorcycle gang. Despite the club's denials of being a criminal organization, a number of its members have been found guilty of committing crimes. Over the years, the club has been the focus of numerous law enforcement operations and has a significant presence in Washington state. The Department of Justice claims that Bandidos members have been actively involved in violent crimes and methamphetamine trafficking in Washington. Surveillance footage that showed Johnny Caragga meeting someone at a nearby grocery store just before the killings drew more attention. Authorities reiterated their conviction that Bandidos motorcycle club members were directly responsible for the Caragga family killings in January 2020. The biker community was urged to provide any information that could help with the investigation. Since then, though, the case had made little to no headway and had stalled for almost 5 years. After more investigation, it was discovered that Johnny had a lengthy history of transporting and distributing drugs. During his frequent visits to California, he allegedly obtained kilograms of cocaine to distribute in Kitsap County. One of Johnny's close friends, Danny, started selling drugs directly to Robert James Watson, the head of the local Bandidos chapter, as a result of his involvement with the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. Indeed, despite their close relationship, the first suspects, Danny J. Kelly Jr., had a falling out with Johnny prior to the murders, allegedly over money that Danny had stolen. Other Bandidos Motorcycle Club members who were considering joining the club were contacted by Johnny as he grew his distribution network in Kitsap County. The locations of Caragga and the suspects prior to, during, and following the murders were displayed by detectives using cell phone tracking. In the 10 days preceding the murders, Danny Kelly Jr. made extensive use of a prepaid mobile burner phone that he had purchased at the Silverdale Target to communicate with John Caragga. Despite the fact that the phone didn't expire until April 2017, communication ceased thereafter. When members of the Bandidos were suspected of being involved in the killings, detectives in January 2020 obtained a search warrant for Robert Watson's cell phone. One of the recovered texts between Duneen and Robert Watson, dated January 23, 2020, included a comment from Duneen about the weather. "A little humid today." The Caragga family had guests over the night of the killings, but Johnny left right away after getting a call. He briefly parked next to another car in a nearby grocery store parking lot before leaving, according to surveillance footage. The friends left the Caragga residence in the meantime. 3 men showed up and started shooting before Johnny could get back. According to reports, Johnny's wife Christielle was shot in the driveway first, then her son Jonathan Higgins, and finally Johnny's son Hunter Shape. Jonathan Higgins was shot after he came out of his room to see how the disturbance was going, and Christelle was shot in the head. At least one shooter ambushed Hunter Shape as he was bringing a pizza inside the house. The evidence suggested that he caught the murderer off guard. He was hit by 2 more shots after the first one missed. Sheep was still alive when he called 911, but he was presumed dead. The call ended abruptly, indicating that the shooter may have damaged or tampered with the phone before shooting Hunter to death. The attackers then used accelerants and fire starter logs to start fires at various points throughout the house, and they threw rocks through the windows to feed the flames. The suspects later displayed questionable conduct, and this evidence connected them to the crime. A witness saw Danny driving Johnny's truck away from the scene of the crime. Days prior to the killings, Danny reportedly bought a prepaid phone from a nearby Target, which he used to speak with Johnny frequently, a common tactic in criminal activity, according to surveillance footage. Only during the 12 days before Johnny's murder was that burner phone used for communication. Interestingly, the phone stopped working just before the murders. Watson claimed to have gotten into a fight with a homeless black man while at a club member's house without his pants. Later that night, Watson called 911 to report that a loaded Glock handgun and another loaded magazine had been stolen from his truck, which had been broken into a few days prior. Watson was fired from Kitsap County Public Works after he stopped showing up for work. Detectives discovered in September 2017 that approximately $303,000 had been deposited into his accounts that year, including multiple cash deposits that were untraceable. According to reports, Johnny Caragga concealed $200,000 beneath his house, but it was never discovered. On the night of the murder, a neighbor also saw Caragga's truck speeding down Tonino Drive and heard gunshots. The driver was recognized by the neighbor as Donnie, whom he had known when Donnie's family shared a home. Nearly bumper to bumper, a silver car followed the truck. Because Donnie and John Caragga disliked each other so much, detectives found it suspicious that Donnie would be at Caragga's house or drive his truck. Robert's brother Johnny Watson's 2006 Mercedes was discovered stripped and abandoned in the Puyallup River less than a week after investigators made public footage of Caragga's truck and the unidentified vehicle at the Camp Union supermarket. The car had not been reported stolen, but its license plates were missing. Later on, though, Robert and his brother paid $1,500 to have the car returned. Why he only thought to report it then, the day after a quadruple murder nearby, was the question that emerged. The second car that was spotted in the grocery store parking lot the night of the killings was thought to be driven by Johnny Watson, the third person. Additionally, his DNA and that of one of the rocks found at the crime scene matched exactly. The community was finally rocked by a major development on June 6, 2022, when 3 men were officially charged with the Caragga family's quadruple murder. In the lengthy investigation that had engulfed the area for years, this was a pivotal point. The arrest operation, which took place over several weeks and involved about 70 police officers from various counties, was carefully planned. The suspects, who were identified as Danny J. Kelly Jr., 43, Johnny James Watson, 49, and Robert James Watson, 50, were arrested in various locations throughout the state. About an hour later, Johnny Watson and Danny were arrested in their Bremerton apartments, while Robert Watson was stopped in traffic at Gig Harbor. The 3 men were charged with a total of 16 felonies each after being arrested and taken to nearby jails. These charges included first-degree burglary, first-degree arson, first-degree murder, and first-degree aggravated murder. A whopping $20 million was set as bail for each defendant. Each of the suspects entered a not guilty plea to the alleged felony charges. When they appeared in court the next morning, the judge placed severe restrictions on their possession of firearms, alcohol, and drugs unless prescribed, and ordered that they be detained without the possibility of release on bond. The court also ordered the defendants to refrain from any communication with one another. Investigators had established a specialized task force to investigate the quadruple homicide in response to the Caragga family murders. The seriousness of the case and law enforcement's resolve to prosecute the offenders were highlighted by this cooperative effort. In the hopes that the arrests would be a major step toward closure for the families impacted by the tragic loss of the Caragga family, the community awaited further developments in the legal proceedings. However, as people gathered to honor them, there was a glimmer of hope despite the gloom. Those affected by the tragedy eagerly awaited the 3 suspects in the Caragga family murder case to be apprehended. Hunter Shope's mother, Carly Scott, had been praying for justice for years, and now her prayers had been heard. Over the years, she had pleaded so passionately for someone to come forward, and it was successful. The public provided the detectives with tips that enabled them to solve the case. Accused of ruthlessly murdering a whole family, the suspects were brought before a Kitsap County judge while being escorted into the courtroom and clearly restrained. The community was deeply scarred by their alleged crimes, which were motivated by disrespect and greed. Emotions were running high during the trial as relatives confronted the defendant and voiced their desire for justice. Given the seriousness of their acts, the suspects gave off an eerie aura. The arrests gave the victims' loved ones a sense of relief and closure despite the suffering and heartache, and this was evident throughout the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office as family members gathered to give detectives and one another nervous hugs following the arrest. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.